of his station, but he apologizes. He has health problems with his eyes, so he couldn't come here, and he greets you. He's very sorry that he cannot be here. So, the first contribution is from Andriy Megger. He will talk about Idzi Radziszewski, founder and first rector of Catholic University of Lublin. Andrzej, please, it's your time.
So, thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be here and to present a few information about the founder and first rector of my university, and also a few information about the context and the roots of the first Catholic university in the East Central Europe. It's I think, good illustration for many topics we have already now before this conference discussed. So the Catholic University of Lublin was founded after First World War on the, can I say, political ruins of the old order, and was an attempt to creatively respond to the challenges of its time. And this is, I think, the main topic of this person. I would like to present how the idea of the Catholic University grew and matured. So in this context, I would like to present above all the aspects, or some of the aspects of the future rector's life, which later influenced his decision to found the Catholic University. And first thing is the family environment. Just a few sentences about it. First of all, we should mention this environment, because his pious mother was occupied in raising 6 children and running the household. The father was, and he was an important person, a teacher who tried to educate and form his pupils based on love for their homeland, which aroused distrust of the Tsarist authorities and led to frequent changes in place of residence. So from the beginning, the Idzi Radziszewski family fostered intellectual interest and extraordinary attention to education in their children. All of the children received a very good education. In addition to Idzi, 2 others achieved significant success. Ignacy became a professor and rector of the Polytechnic of Warsaw, the capital city, and Paweł was a professor at the University of Stefan Batory in Vilnius. So from the childhood, so can I say, Idzi learned moral principles, patriotism, adaptation to difficult conditions, diligence, perseverance, avoidance of luxury and frugality. The second important stage was education, his education. First there was the Gymnasium in Płock in central Poland now, where his time there coincided with another wave of Russification of Poles. He supplemented his knowledge, especially in the area of Polish literature, culture, outside of school, in illegal independent study groups. This forced him to make many sacrifices, giving up leisure activities, so as to skillfully organize his time and his work, taking advantage of every moment. At the seminary in Wrocław, his love for philosophy became apparent. He studied it to a much wider extent than what was stipulated by the seminary program. A philosophy club was founded at his initiative. The seminary formators and professors saw him as an outstanding student both intellectually and spiritually. Because of his good academic record, exemplary attitude and ability to lead others, the diocesan authorities selected Idzi to study at the Spiritual or Theological Academy in St. Petersburg, as he had a particular predisposition to hold important church positions in the future. The academy was designed by the state authorities with the primary intention of educating church officials who would be loyal to the authorities, but thanks to its enlightened professors, it educated outstanding graduates who perfectly understood their ecclesial vocation and the role of the church in the lands of the Russian partition. I can say also that a spirit of unity and brotherhood prevailed in the academy more than in the country. After 4 years of the study of philosophy and theology, as well as education in foreign languages, Radziszewski returned to his home seminary when he was ordained to the priesthood. A crucial and exceptionally important moment was his time of doctoral studies at the Higher Institute of Philosophy of the Catholic University of Lublin in Belgium. It was at this time that his objective of establishing a Catholic university was born. Radziszewski was impressed by the exemplary functioning of the university and therefore wrote in his notes, "It is our misfortune that we do not have our own Catholic institution of higher learning in our country." He was impressed above all by the academic research and by the concern of the integral development of the students. When it comes to the scientific research, it is important to realize that the most characteristic direction of philosophy at that time was positivism, scientism, the main feature of which was complete trust in science as being able to explain all phenomena. So that such an approach had a negative impact on the attitude towards religion. Only the natural was accepted. Faith and supernaturalism were excluded and were considered as superstitions and anachronisms. Positivists considered that faith had nothing in common with science. The positivistic anti-Christian philosophical attitude spread widely among the intelligentsia. There was then a need for the Catholic Church to develop a program opposing this ideology. Catholic thinkers were at that time focused on scholastic philosophy, especially Thomism, for finding solution to the complex problem of the era. This intellectual movement was led by Pope Leo XIII, who in 1879 promulgated the encyclical Aeterni Patris. Its main premise was, while preserving the integrity of certain theses of philosophy, like, for example, the existence of God, immortality of the soul, freedom of the will, exclusion of materialism, determinism, to open up the possibility of supplementing Thomism with results of modern scholarship. The Catholic University of Lublin was the community most involved in this research. The institution's goal was to conduct research on the scholastics, especially on Thomism, using contemporary philosophical trends and the latest results from specific sciences, the natural sciences, mathematics, sociology, history, and law. All of these studies were concerned principally with justifying the view that science and faith are not mutually exclusive, and that the sciences can and should be a believer. For this reason, the professors of the Institute of Philosophy were simultaneously lecturers in the departments of philosophical, literary theology, law, physics, mathematics, and medicine. Similarly, students chose elective subjects in the fields of mathematics, the natural sciences, or history, social sciences. Father Radziszewski wrote in his memoirs, "One who is truly educated is not hindered by faith, nor is a properly enlightened Catholic hindered by science." This new work methods suited Father Radziszewski perfectly, who from his early youth was preoccupied with philosophical problems, concerned for the worldview of the Polish intelligentsia, and dismay at their loss of faith due to lack of belief in the harmony existing between science and faith. Under the direction of the distinguished professor Father Désiré Mercier, later Cardinal and Primate of Belgium, he undertook studies on the development of the philosophical opinions of Charles Darwin and Herbert Spencer, and he defended his doctorate dissertation entitled De religionis genesi in evolutionismo Darwino-Spenceriano. His time at Louvain left an impact not only on Radziszewski's education, but also on his personality and spiritual life. And this is also a very interesting moment. In the community of priest students, a great emphasis was placed on prayer. Devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus was especially cultivated. The Feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus was established about 30 years later for this time. In addition, emphasis was placed not only on the intellectual development of students, but time was also found for recreation, playing football. Walks and trips were organized in which Father Mercier participated, looking for an opportunity to get to know his students. Worth mentioning here is the friendship, the long-lasting bond, the mutual understanding which united Father Mercier and Father Radziszewski. In preserved letters of Father Radziszewski, he calls him "my beloved master, wise and excellent teacher, and father and guide of my thought." Similarly, Cardinal Mercier regarded his most gifted student as being distinguished by industry, intelligence, and extraordinary abilities. They kept in touch by letter until the death of Father Radziszewski. After finishing his studies in Louvain, he made several more scholarly trips to the most important European centers. These include, among others, to England, Oxford, Cambridge, France, the Sorbonne, Collège de France, Rome, Vienna, Fribourg, where he not only deepened his knowledge, but also carefully observed the activities and organization of the university he visited, Catholic and not Catholic. Yet he still considered the University of Louvain to be the best model of a Catholic university. His stay in Belgium became for Father Radziszewski an inspiration for undertaking many initiatives in the management positions entrusted to him after his return at the seminary in Włocławek and at the Spiritual Theological Academy in St. Petersburg. In these places, among other things, he reorganized the curriculum, raised the standard of lectures, organized lectures for all interested auditors, including lay persons. He founded a periodical dedicated to theological and philosophical issues. In particular, this concerned reconciling traditions of the Church with the achievements of modern culture. His aim was to introduce students to independent thinking. He wanted to break with the system of mastering material by mechanical memorization, forcing one to constantly think with someone else's brain. He was involved in educational activities and work of academic societies also. And nonetheless, the final stage and the most important moment. The First World War awakened the hope in Polish hearts of gaining independence after more than 120 years of subjugation. Father Radziszewski too was waiting for the resurrection of his homeland and the work of rebuilding a free Poland. His goal was to prepare an educational environment for Catholic intelligentsia, that is, people educated in a chosen secular discipline and at the same time maintaining an active connection with the Church, intellectually deepening the truths of faith and able to defend the often attacked faith. The idea of founding one had been maturing in him for many years, as I said. In bringing his vision into reality, he was undoubtedly helped by both inborn and developed character traits such as a talent for organizing, the gift of persuasiveness, an ability to collaborate with others, consistency in action, serenity, prudence, extraordinary diligence, patience, being undeterred by difficulties and persistent pursuit of goal. The inauguration of the first academical year took place on December 8, 1980. Although many faculties had been planned, including mathematics and natural sciences, medicine and agriculture, in reality it was possible to open only 4: theology, canon law and moral education, law and socio-economic sciences, and humanities. 350 persons registered for the first year of studies. In his inaugural address, the founder presented the 3 basis tasks of the university. And that's the main point of my speech. First, conducting impartial academic research in accordance with the conviction that reason and faith are not opposed but mutually supportive. The second thing, forming a cadre of Catholic intelligentsia, that is to say, creating such an atmosphere at the university that in addition to their studies, young people could reflect deeply on the truth of faith, pray about them, and accept them as values resulting from authentic conviction and not only from tradition. So he said his goal was an intellectual deepening of the Christian worldview. Catholics formed in this way were to be sent to various positions, in particular to the highest levels of state and local government, where the most important decisions regarding the social life of the reborn homeland are made. And the third point, enhancing the culture of the entire nation of Poland through dissemination of research results and university ideas, through academic and other publications, by organizing ongoing education courses for various social groups outside the university, raising awareness of this spirit among school-age youth of various levels. A Catholic university operating in this way should contribute to the revival of Polish Catholicism, which was, according to the founder, superficial and inconsistent, based on traditions and customs, and having no influence on people's attitudes. It was very important for the country, newly emerging after over a century of subjugation. Radziszewski believed that a state without leaders of high moral and intellectual standards could not stand and will fall back into subjugation. He also saw other dangers, such as the Marxist-Leninist ideology that he encountered in Russia, which was hostile to the church and Freemasonry. He therefore desired to create a place which would defend Christian and national values. Moreover, he wanted to expand the university's influence also to Polonia, but also to those of Polish roots living outside of Poland and meet their needs. He considered studies as essential in effectively preserving national spirit. It should also be noted that tolerance, respect for political and religious convictions prevailed at the university. For example, one economist, Professor Lewiński, he was of the Lutheran faith. These were the basic goals of the Catholic University of Lublin, to the organization of which he devoted the last few years of his life, although he had been preparing for this mission since his youth. He died of pneumonia at the age of 51, carrying until the end not only the bricks and mortar of the university, but also for the unity of its academic community. He himself spearheaded the work of the university chaplaincy. Yes, and this is also a very interesting photo, because Father Radziszewski was really a consummate intellectual, charismatic creator, extraordinary organizer, and he had a clearly defined vision of the university, which is summarized in the motto still used today, as you see, Deo et Patria, so for the God and for the homeland. Giving his reasons for establishing the university and for the need of educating young people, the first rector said during the inauguration, "Rebuilding Polish statehood should be based on a foundation ensuring comprehensive development and prosperity. One such foundation is education in the best sense of the word, because it is rightly taken for granted that the value, importance, role, and fate of each nation are ultimately always determined by the kind of schools it has." Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andrzej, for your very interesting story and presentation. And yes, discussion will be at the end of the session, so please, I invite here Andriy Mykhaleyko, who will present from Puku, who will present Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky and his influence on the development of education in Ukraine.
Dear colleagues, thank you very much for your welcome, and I'm very glad to be here and to speak to you. My colleague Svetlana Hudkina has already spoken about Jozef Ďurček and about his contribution to the development of theological education in Ukraine. My remarks are about a person who was very closely connected with Ďurček and who also influenced him, Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky. Sheptytsky. Let me start with a few facts of his life. Sheptytsky is still considered one of the most influential figures of the Greek Catholic Church in Ukraine. For 44 years, he led his church as its metropolitan. In his time, his authority within Ukrainian society in Eastern Galicia was unquestioned. However, Sheptytsky's biography shows that this way to recognition was very exciting and varied. The future metropolitan was baptized in the Latin rite and grew up in the Roman Catholic tradition and Polish culture. His ancestors on the father's side held important posts in the hierarchy of the Greek Catholic Church in the 17th and 18th centuries. But his grandfather abandoned the Greek Catholic rite and switched to Latin. When young Sheptytsky decided to join the Greek Catholic Order of Basilians rather than a Roman Catholic one in 1888, his decision caused discussions and tensions within the family. It had taken several years for him to get the family approval. He had 4 brothers. Of them, 3 remained Roman Catholics, and some made careers in the Polish state. Only 1 brother followed the Metropolitan and became a Greek Catholic monk of the Studite monastery. Why Andrey Sheptytsky did not remain Roman Catholic, but changed to the Greek Catholic rite? The return to the tradition of ancestors on the father's side, on the one hand, was based on Sheptytsky's personal desire to work for the restoration of the unity of the Eastern Church with the Catholic one. On the other hand, this change was also a part of union plans of the Holy See. Pope Leo XIII, in particular, was one of his most significant persons who inspired him to work for union of the churches. This aspiration accompanied and influenced him until the end of his life. Sheptytsky experienced 6 regime changes during his metropolitan office. In these different political contexts, he propagated his ideas of how to win orthodoxy to Catholicism. After joining the Basilian order, already at the age of 34, he was designated Bishop of the Greek Catholic Diocese of Stanislav, and a year later Archbishop and Metropolitan in Lviv, or Lemberg at that time. In the first decade of his office as Metropolitan, he made plans to unite Russian Orthodoxy with the Catholic Church. For example, he planned an institute for the training of future missionaries for Russia and made secret trips to the Russian Empire to explore possible union options. Because of his commitment to Russia and a clear political position on the Habsburgs, he was arrested by the Russians at the beginning of First World War and spent 3 years in Russian custody. At the end of the war, Sheptytsky became involved in the failed attempts to establish a Ukrainian state. Then followed the interwar years with a complex and difficult relationship with the Polish state and the Ukrainian nationalists. Above all, the period of the Second World War was to become one of the greatest challenges for him, coinciding with the last 3 years of his life. From the very beginning, Sheptytsky was convinced of the special mission of his church in the East. This conviction was based on the fact that his church and the East Slavic Christianity were united by a common rite and a common tradition. At various times in his life, and in the beginning and even in the year of his death, he repeated the missionary call of Pope Urban VIII to Ruthenians or Ukrainians in 1629. O mei Rutheni, per vos ego orientem spero convertendam. O my Ruthenians, through you I hope to convert the East. Sheptytsky was convinced that this call had not lost its ecclesiastical and historical relevance. The main problem was, however, how his church could join the work of unification in the most effective way. In general, I would distinguish two ways in his activities in this direction, ad intra and ad extra. From the very beginning, Sheptytsky was aware that this task could not be accomplished without returning to authentic Eastern Christian sources by reforming the church he led. The ad instra way means the Greek Catholic Church needed a new powerful impetus, which is, in his opinion, was to restore Byzantine traditions. Therefore, one of the most important aspects of Metropolitan Sheptytsky's activity, which had a significant and decisive influence on the identity of the Greek Catholic Church, was so-called Eastern turn, directed to Eastern Christian sources and the Byzantine Slavic heritage. First of all, it concerned liturgical practices of the Greek Catholic Church. The appeal to rite and worship should not be surprising, since rite and in the East, Christianity in general, and thus the Byzantine rite of the Greek Catholic Church, has always been an important identity marker that emphasized the national separateness of Ukrainian Catholics. On the other hand, this was the realization that Orthodox churches, Orthodox Christians, even more than Greek Catholics, attached great importance to ritual elements. An important component of Sheptytsky's argument for the legitimacy of the reforms, which I would characterize as a moderate Easternization of the Greek Catholic Church, was his emphasis on an authentic understanding of the term Catholic or the Catholic Church. He emphasized that the Catholic Church should not be equated with the Latin Church, and in his pastoral writings he often preferred the concept of the universal church, emphasizing its primary meaning. The second way, the ad extra way, concerned the Orthodox churches. Sheptytsky sought to change the way of thinking of the Orthodox themselves. Because of the identification of the concepts of Catholic and Latin, or because of the absolute dominance of the Latin tradition in the Catholic Church, the Orthodox could not imagine that Eastern rites could coexist in it on an equal conditions. In his opinion, rapprochement was not possible without working to change the way of thinking of the Orthodox. He expressed this idea eloquently in the introduction to the German book on the Christian East, the Christliche Osten Geist und Gestalt, 1939. I quote, The most important goal of every unification effort should be to change the general opinion of our Eastern separated brethren, so that they themselves desire and look forward to reunion with the core of the Catholic Church. This belief in the importance of changing the way of thinking of the Orthodox had an impact on the formation of models of unification with them. As is well known, before the Second Vatican Council, the only way to restore unity was for Orthodox or Protestants to return to the Catholic Church. This would include both individual conversions and the conversion of the larger groups. The Metropolitan did not rule out individual conversions, but he favored the model of corporate union or collective union. Since the Church schism was collective in nature, the unification should also be collective. The danger of individual conversions, he believed, was that this model would turn even more Orthodox Christians away from the idea of unity. For a full-fledged union, the most comprehensive consensus should be reached. This conviction was driven by the historical experience of previous attempts of unification. The Union of Florence, for example, although partially successful, in Sheptytsky's view, alienated rather than brought close the majority of the Christian East. A similar problem was with the Union of the Breast, which caused a controversy between Greek Catholics and Orthodox. This was because it was initiated from above and did not receive sufficient general support. Sheptytsky realized that rapprochement with Orthodox could not be a one-way movement. So he tried to establish a direct dialogue and communication that would help them get to know each other better and overcome prejudice. In 1941, in an address to Orthodox bishops and intellectuals, he even expressed his willingness to compromise. Obviously, he wasn't talking about compromises concerning matters of faith or dogma, but rather of ritual nature. Metropolitan Sheptytsky did not consider the new possible unification of Christians in the Slavic East to be a repetition of the Union of Brest. The ultimate goal of the Orthodox Greek Catholic Union should not have been an expansion of the Greek Catholic, but a new confession, which was neither Asian Orthodoxy nor the Asian Greek Catholic Church, but a church which would have a new identity. What importance did Sheptytsky attach to theological education in his plans concerning the unity of the churches? He understood the union goals could not be achieved without raising the level of education in the Greek Catholic Church. The foundation of the Theological Academy in 1929 by Sheptytsky was an important step in solving this problem. This institution was to become the forerunner of today's Ukrainian Catholic University. Above all, two factors contributed to the establishment of the Academy. First, the Galician Ukrainians, who had been reincorporated into the Polish state after 1918, did not have their own university where students could be educated in the national language. Secondly, the Greek Catholic Church in Galicia was affected by the spirit of renewal in the Catholic Church. Confronted with this, Sheptytsky and the first rector of the academy, Jozef Ďurček, strove to ensure that theology was not only imported from outside, but could grow and develop specifically on Ukrainian ground in the restoration of forgotten Eastern Church traditions. It was not to stop at the foundation of the academy. Sheptytsky and Ďurček were determined to develop the academy into a university. Already at the beginning of the 20th century, Sheptytsky had brought this idea of a Greek Catholic university in the Habsburg monarchy into the discussion. He spoke about it in 1910 in the Parliament of Vienna and emphasized the necessity of establishing a university for Ukrainians. The first significant step in this direction was taken only in 1929 with the establishment of the Theological Academy. Sheptytsky saw in it not only an important milestone for raising the level of education in the Greek Catholic Church, but also an important pillar for the union work. In his inaugural address at the opening of the Theological Academy, he attached special importance to the location of the Greek Catholic Church on the border between East and West. By our location between the Western and Eastern worlds, the role of mediator between East and West is imposed upon us. If this task of mediator is fulfilled appropriately, it can have a great significance for these two different cultures that are uniting into one in our country, in our educational institutions, and in our souls. In this process of unification, Eastern Catholic should play a special role, he believed. The scientific theology of the East has been developed at that time in the West. However, there have remained theoretical scientific studies that lacked reference to the life of the Eastern Church. Therefore, for Sheptytsky, it was indispensable that the focus of the Eastern Christian studies has to be done first by the Eastern Catholics themselves. The promotion of Eastern Church theology at the Academy was of extraordinary importance to the Greek Catholic Church for several reasons. First, because of its political and geographical proximity to the Orthodox denomination. Second, because of its affiliation with the East Slavs. And third, because of its religious cultural affinity with the greatest people of the separated East. Under these premises, the Greek Catholic Church was challenged to take up the theological questions in view of unity. The statutes of the Academy indicate that the Pontifical Oriental Institute in Rome served as its model. Like the Oriental Institute, the Academy was to be open to Orthodox students in order to bring them closer to the Union. The new academic program was to be oriented toward focal points of Eastern theology, namely in all theological subjects. In the central subject of dogmatics, it was necessary to bring the questions of the Orthodox into discourse. Homiletics should discover the patristic heritage of the Eastern Church and orient itself to the Church Fathers. In church history, not only the current question of church union should be treated with priority, but also questions of canon law, liturgical science and art under a special Eastern Church perspective. At the same time, the leadership of the Academy pleaded that it should be open to Western theology. Since Eastern Church theology had often been overlaid by Latin theological views, the Academy was not only to fill the gap in Catholic theology in the East, but at the same time to broaden its own interpretation of Catholic theology. This optimism was dampened because of ecclesiastical and political problems. The expectations and hopes in the Academy, which in perspective was to be transformed into a university, met with various resistances. All efforts in Rome were unsuccessful due to political circumstances. The Second World War was a break for the Greek Catholic Church and for theological education. After the war, the Greek Catholic Church was banned in the Soviet Union, and the Academy was dissolved. After modest attempts to continue the theological education tradition in the diaspora, it was not until 1994 that it was able to resume its work in Ukraine and established itself as a Catholic university in 2002. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andriy, for your presentation. Very impressive and interesting. And now I invite Professor Conboy to present her speech.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with all of you. Today, I'd like to talk with you about Sister Madeleva Wolff, a sister of the Holy Cross, who served as the third president of St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana. St. Mary's was founded in 1844. The college has a long history as a sister school to the University of Notre Dame, and it is widely recognized as the premier Catholic college for women in the United States. And I have the honor of serving as its 14th president. There have been many significant personalities in the leadership of St. Mary's College in its nearly 2 centuries. For example, 4 French sisters heard the call from Father Edward Sorin in 1843 to travel over sea and rough land to northwest Indiana, where they could assist the priests who had just a year earlier founded the University of Notre Dame. Within 12 months, the sisters had also opened an academy for girls, and that would eventually evolve to become St. Mary's College. These 4 sisters were really what I would call the framers that framed all that St. Mary's would become over time. About a decade later, Mother Angela Gillespie, a big personality in our institutional history, served as both the director of studies at St. Mary's Academy and also as the leader of the convent. She deepened the academy curriculum, and she was responsible for moving the convent and the academy, I mean buildings and all, pulled by oxen, from their original location in Michigan, Bertrand, Michigan, to the current location of St. Mary's College, adjacent to the University of Notre Dame. She might be considered our trailblazer. Mother Pauline O'Neill was also a notable personality in the history of St. Mary's. During her term as the college's first president from 1895 to 1931, she transitioned the academy to its legal and accredited status as a college, and she conferred the first academic degrees in 1898. She was always known as the Builder, and her infrastructure legacy includes the extraordinary Gothic centerpiece of our campus, Lamont Hall. Mother Pauline had the audacity to build this building in 1925 when the student body of St. Mary's was fewer than 300 students. She was one of many big thinkers in the history of St. Mary's. So the four framers, Angela the Trailblazer, Pauline the Builder, these might have been the candidates for my exploration of a significant personality at St. Mary's College. But in fact, if you asked almost anyone to name the single figure most associated with the life of the college, they would probably name Sister Madeleva Wolff, the third president, who served from 1934 to 1961. In her 27 years leading the college, Madeleva faced some of the greatest challenges of the 20th century. She began in the dark heart of the Depression. She later saw the full length of World War II, the spread of communism, the Cold War, the Korean War, the early years of the Civil Rights Movement and of the Women's Rights Movement. And she also inherited the debt for that big building I just showed you, so she had a lot on her plate. But throughout her presidency, she would continually inspire others to a greater vision for St. Mary's as a distinguished and truly rigorous liberal arts college. Indeed, she's actually often credited with transforming Catholic women's education in the United States. She was not only a visionary, she was also a poet, an essayist, and a memoir writer. When she took the role of president, which was a role she didn't want and had been promised she would never have to fulfill, she took it on as an obedience. She modestly claimed that her best qualifications for the position were her ability to work and her capacity to dream. She obviously brought many more qualifications than these. Madeleva always wore this distinctive habit of the Sisters of the Holy Cross, which unmistakably marked her as a professed religious, but she was also worldly and sophisticated. She earned her PhD at the University of California, Berkeley. She undertook further studies at Oxford University. She traveled extensively in the US and beyond, and she enjoyed the company of other prominent Catholic intellectuals. She also had extensive leadership experience, having built another college from scratch, which I know at least one other person here knows about. And that was the College of St. Mary's of the Wasatch in Utah. So she brought all this learning and all this experience to a college, St. Mary's, that needed enlarged perspectives and new ambitions if it was going to meet the changing needs of the world. Through her writing and all the recorded leadership decisions she made at St. Mary's, Sister Madeleva left many enduring lessons that remain generally relevant for college and university decision makers today. One of these is the concept of the relaxed grasp. This she borrowed from Louise Imogen Guiney's description of St. Ignatius of Loyola. On a personal level, Madeleva embraced the Ignatian concept of indifference or holy poverty, which she interpreted as a kind of open-handedness that liberated her from a clutching hold on friends, pupils, places, things. In her role at the college, I think this manifested as an openness to change and a fearlessness in letting go of practices that no longer worked. She audaciously pushed St. Mary's College in new directions, and I believe her overarching message of the relaxed grasp has guided those who followed in her footsteps. The relaxed grasp, so think about the grasp and then just relax it a little. It really provides a metaphor for understanding her presidency. One example is her attention to organizational structure. When she started at the college, every decision fell to the president. The faculty literally could not move the furniture without her permission. She reviewed the reference books that they used in their courses, and she reviewed the material and course content they described on their syllabi. Over time, though, she loosened her hold on many areas of the college, building an administrative team that had real delegated powers. She learned that she needed to save her efforts for the things that only she could do, such as identify the themes and the values that would become the legacy of her presidency. These included responsibility, leadership, excellence, and the value of womanhood. She needed a strong team to do the rest of the work. Moreover, although she was herself a graduate of St. Mary's College, she did not maintain a nostalgic grip on the past or assume that the education that had served her so well was necessarily the best education for a contemporary student. She understood that students had changed over the quarter century since she had attended the college, and she encouraged students to be the co-creators of an educational environment in which they could thrive. A believer in what we might today call self-governance, Madeleva relaxed the strict convent-like rules that had governed most aspects of student life, and she encouraged students to develop their own governance systems. Her biographer, Gail Mandel, also notes that Madeleva's administration, and I quote, welcomed Notre Dame men to campus, encouraging not only a more active social exchange between the two campuses, but also intercollegiate drama, music, and debate. In an environment of traditionalists, she also encouraged a relaxed grasp by opening up the long-standing undergraduate curriculum. Perhaps because she had been educated in multiple institutions, or perhaps because she learned from attending national meetings of other academics, Madeleva rejected insularity. She eagerly sought the best advice she could get for the undergraduate curriculum at St. Mary's, at one point consulting Robert Hutchins, the young, brilliant, and charismatic president of the University of Chicago, and also consulting Chicago law professor Mortimer Adler. In fact, she assembled a team of sisters on the faculty who spent 5 weeks building the program on visits to Professor Adler's Chicago apartment. This is something I've really tried hard to imagine. In 1935, 5 earnest sisters, clothed just like this, in the habit, studiously collaborating with a young, secular, Jewish intellectual at a major research institution. Well, the result was an innovative curriculum that was widely copied by other colleges and universities and stayed in place at St. Mary's for over 25 years. In addition to innovating the undergraduate curriculum, Sister Madeleva encouraged the development of adult education, primarily for intellectual enrichment. She once said, quote, Christian education began with adult education. The first Christian college was made up of 12 men aged 20 to 40 with Christ as their teacher, end quote. She also led St. Mary's into the realm of graduate education with the establishment in 1943 of the Graduate School of Sacred Theology, the first program in the world that gave women access to graduate theology education. She actually understood that advanced education in theology would prepare women to teach in Catholic elementary and secondary schools, and she relished the fact that St. Mary's would have this broad influence on Catholic education. Clearly, Sister Madeleva could open her hand to seize an opportunity, even if that opportunity changed the primarily undergraduate focus of the college. And clearly, these opportunities put St. Mary's on the map in new ways. The reputational impact of the Graduate School for Sacred Theology cannot be underestimated. Gail Mandel makes this abundantly clear. Within a decade, this is Gail Mandel speaking, within a decade, after close consultation with the faculty of the School of Sacred Theology, the Vatican set up its own Graduate School of Theology for women, patterning it on the St. Mary's program. At the request of the Holy Father, Madeleva turned over all the documents pertaining to the school, including its curricular plan, to his representatives. Furthermore, St. Mary's agreed to validate the credits of the graduates from the United States who completed their studies at Regina Mundi. Only after more and more Catholic universities began to admit women into their theology programs was the decision made in 1966 to phase out the school. That was all yellow. Paradoxically, though, phasing out the School of Sacred Theology could actually be seen as a declaration of victory by St. Mary's. After all, the goal of educating women in theology was now widely embraced. This can also be seen as the relaxed grasp, the ability to hold and then to let go, or really to let grow something immensely important. 24 years, 76 doctorates, and 354 master's degrees are some measures of the school's success. But the chance to lead international change and opportunities for women was the ultimate victory. As Gail Mandel writes, quote, "When Notre Dame and the Catholic University finally designed graduate programs in theology for lay people, Bishop O'Hara Riley commented that they were only following a suit that Madeleva had already played." The relaxed grasp may help us understand Sister Madeleva's presidency, but it is also a leadership lesson for today's Catholic colleges and universities. For many of us, our missions and founding documents can make change difficult rather than enabling it. We can get so attached to fixed notions of our institutional identity that we're unable to ask whether the curriculum and co-curriculum continue to speak to the longings of a new generation. Instead of exploring how we can maintain a core identity while opening ourselves up to new ideas, we sometimes double down on what we think students need and want, rather than seeing the past as prologue to the possibilities of the future. In the institutions founded by the Sisters, Priests, and Brothers of the Holy Cross, as I mentioned this morning, we are fortunate to have a charism that embraces adaptability. Sister Madeleva leaned into that spirit of adaptability in her leadership era, and others followed. A few decades after Madeleva retired, the Sisters of the Holy Cross also practiced a version of the relaxed grasp. They loosened their control over St. Mary's and embraced even deeper collaborations with lay leaders, both in the presidency and in the board of trustees. And even today, as St. Mary's faculty and staff are devising a new signature experience, a new general education program, and a new model for residential life, community, and engagement, we frequently return to the title of our strategic plan for inspiration: Revere and Revise. When we wrote this plan, I had not thought of this as a version of the relaxed grasp, but of course it is. There are other lessons from Sister Madeleva. One would be her concept of taking the blame. In her autobiography, My First 70 Years, Sister Madeleva recounts an amusing conversation she overheard on a boat from Buffalo to Detroit. This was a conversation between a husband and wife. Wife, who runs this boat? Husband, the captain. Wife, what does he do? Husband, nothing. Wife, oh, but he must do something. Husband, no, he doesn't. He doesn't do a thing. Wife, well, who does the work? Husband, the crew, you'll see. The crew does the work. He sits in his office. He doesn't do a thing. Wife, still unconvinced. Well, I suppose there has to be someone to take the blame for things. Madeleva came to see taking the blame as a parable for her presidency and a portal to the imperative that governed her work. First things must come first. In this chapter of her memoir, she considers a number of first things she took on, ranging from reorganizing the college bulletin to ensuring members of the faculty had the best advanced degrees, to starting a nursing program, to maintaining family-style meals and and robust discourse in the dining room. But she culminates her chapter with the decision in 1941 to integrate the college racially. Archbishop Stritch, later cardinal, backed her all the way, even supporting her as she responded to enraged letters from Southern parents. She was willing, she said, to take the blame, because when she was asked if she would admit black students, she said, quote, "I knew only one answer, the right one." Taking the blame is another leadership lesson for our times. Almost 8 decades after Madeleva's decision to admit the first black student, St. Mary's is still not as diverse as all our students deserve it to be. On my first day as president, June 1st, 2020, the United States was facing a racial reckoning. George Floyd was the most recent black person to be murdered at the hands of law enforcement officials, and there were protests, often violent protests, underway all across the country. I knew I had to make a statement on my first day, and I knew I had to do more. I had to do something that mattered in the context of our community. At the time, I knew nothing of Sister Madeleva's integration decision in 1941, nothing. But for some reason, I walked over to the Sisters' Cemetery on campus, and I found her grave. I stood there in meditation, and then I said out loud, "Well, what would you do?" And it's hard to believe, but this is true. I walked back to my office, and I picked up a book on my desk, her autobiography, My First 70 Years. I just randomly ran my thumb across the spine, and I opened it, looking for some sign. I had opened to the very spot where she described integrating the college. So taking a page out of her book, literally, I took bold action at St. Mary's, bolder, frankly, than some of my advisors wanted, and I'm proud of the results that we have today. I could add other lessons from Sister Madeleva Wolff, a woman of capacious imagination, a remarkable personality. But I think it might be important to say just a few words about what she did not or could not imagine. Her writings have an overarching optimism, even when they grow solemn about the perceived threats of communism, about a world marked by continuous violence, or about illness or personal loss. In an essay called "The Catholic College Changes Its Mind," she brings that optimism to bear on the future of women's education, and Catholic women's education in particular. Hearing a prediction by distinguished educators in 1961 that, quote, "no more than 10 of the 100 and more women's colleges now in existence will be functioning in 2061, she writes, quote, "all this is possible. I think it is neither necessary nor inevitable. Speaking for the Catholic College for Women, I do not think it will happen." In fact, the 100 or more women's colleges that Sister Madeleva referred to in 1961 were really 230 women's colleges. But here we are in 2023 with only 37 years left on that prediction for 2061, and there are just 31 women's colleges left in the United States. Only 8 are Catholic women's colleges. Some of the lost 200 merged with other colleges, others closed. But Sister Madeleva's optimism seems to have been misplaced. She simply could not have imagined the dramatic speed of other changes to our contemporary Catholic world when she wrote about the stability and adaptability of her Holy Cross sisterhood. The decline in vocations across all Catholic religious groups, the priest sexual abuse crisis, the exodus from organized religion in general. Even, in fact, the fact that not one sister of the Holy Cross is in employment today at her beloved St. Mary's. All this would have been beyond the pale of Madeleva's imagination. Madeleva did not have what we might today call the catastrophic imagination, either the ability or the inclination to imagine the worst things that might happen. To do so might have destroyed the 2 gifts she claimed she brought to the role, her ability to work and her capacity to dream. nor, I believe, could she have imagined when she left office the level of career aspiration that college women bring to St. Mary's today. Although she wrote so much about the importance of liberal arts education, Sister Madeleva was more focused on this being an education for eternity than an education for women's economic and social empowerment. She wanted women to have a deep appreciation for the arts, the sciences, and the humanities, but she considered her graduates' primary aspirations and roles to be as mothers educating their children. Today's students want more. They may want that, but they also want more. So, Sister Madeleva Wolff, she was a framer, a trailblazer, and a builder, a dreamer and a doer, a poet and a prophet, a preserver of the past and an architect of the future. She had big ambitions for a small college, and she was bold in both thought and action. She understood that everything must evolve if it is to survive, and she was unafraid to help the Catholic College change its mind. It's no wonder, I think, that St. Mary's remains one of those 8 colleges, Catholic women's colleges in America, that is thriving today. Sister Madeleva made changes in her era that have positioned the college for the future. Today, even as we are clear-eyed about the many threats that are facing American higher education, we honor her legacy and the legacy of all those big-thinking forebears as we position the college for many bright tomorrows. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution about very nice women. Now discussion should follow. But I have been told that there is one little problem with lunch. That there is a time. I don't know. Martin.
Actually, we have so 15 minutes for discussion.
So we can have 15 minutes for a discussion now. So please, Andrzej and Andriy. So we have 15 minutes for a discussion. It's your time to comment or put questions.
I have a question for Andriy. So it was fascinating hearing more about Sheptytsky. I'm wondering, did he succeed in any way with the Orthodox Church?
It's a question for me.
Yeah.
He tried. He wasn't successful, but his ideas, I would say, his ideas were like forerunners of modern ecumenism. He knew at his lifetime the most important pioneers of a modern Catholic ecumenism, like Cardinal Messier, Prince Max von Sachsen, and so on. He was called by Yves Congar as one of the important pioneers of Catholic ecumenism. His main idea was it is not a right way just to convert some people from Orthodox to Catholic Church. His idea was, his vision was a corporative union, like a church division was corporate one, and he dreamed of a union of the whole church, Catholic and Orthodox, first of all. So it was more important for him to speak about ideas of the unity than about a concrete way how to win some new Orthodox for the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Conboy. there is also some core, right? That you hold on to tight and you don't let go of. I wonder if you have any insights about how you distinguish, right, what is core and what needs to be held, and what you, how you can respond to signs of trends. Because I know that might be where there is the friction. If someone says this is something to hold on to, and others, so if you can speak to that, please.
Yes, I think really the Catholic identity, as we express it at St. Mary's, is something that remains core. You know, over time, there are people who've said, maybe talk about yourselves a little less as a Catholic institution, just a little more, find other ways to appeal to students. What we have found is that when women come to St. Mary's who come from different traditions, they often come and find themselves really happy to be in an environment where there is some commitment to a religious identity, even if it isn't their own religious identity, even if they have no religious identity. Only about 60% of St. Mary's students today identify as Catholics. You know, that's them saying that they, filling out their form and identifying themselves as Catholic. But we have Muslim students on campus in particular who I think find a Catholic college a very comfortable place to grow and learn. And even if they're learning about a faith that is not their own, they have opportunities to deepen their own faiths, and our students have opportunities. Our American students, our Catholic students, our non-Catholic and Jewish and non-believing students have opportunities to learn with them. So I think that there are a number of ways in which we hold on to that Catholic faith. At the same time, I think we need to be cognizant that when students are coming to college, they have many things they're thinking about as part of the experience that they're looking for. And so we have recently started to talk, and we have this phrase we've been using, which is in through their door, out through ours. So they might come in to St. Mary's through a door that they see as about the kind of career that they might be able to develop, or something that isn't necessarily touching on the core of what we consider St. Mary's, but they're going to go out with some of that core, whether they came in wanting it or not. And so helping them see that they can meet their own goals while we know that we're going to get some of our goals is part of the way that we're addressing that.
A brief question for Father Megger, if I may. Thank you so much, all of you. Some people say you need a different skill set if you are the founding person of an institution and then the consolidator, so the trailblazer versus the consolidator. If you think back to the founder of the Catholic University of Lublin, do you think that this is true?
Yes.
So thank you for your question. I think it's true. Father Radziszewski was really complicated and simple mechanism person, and he could get together many things, many areas of his living and of these things. Maybe for a few years I heard some very interesting term, the pontifical theology. And the first meaning, it doesn't mean that we are studying the Pope's documents, but in the etymological meaning, pontifex, so those men who built the bridges. And I think the main task of Father Radziszewski and of his works, it will be building the bridges between the different disciplines of sciences, theology, and also between the persons, so the relationships.
You will see anybody willing to ask or comment. So I can close this session. Thank you very much for all you three. It was very, very interesting. And you can see. Our timetable was a bit modified, as you see, but I think that it is possible to catch on 2 p.m. to start the last session. So please, if it is possible, eat healthy, not very quickly. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to our afternoon session. Our train is a little bit late, but we are, please, Jim, but we are completely relaxed about that. The last session can be shortened, and we want to give the full 20 minutes to each of our 4 afternoon speakers and leave some time for discussion. Normally we say after lunch we need a very strong speaker, and this is Jim McAdams. Yes, what are you looking for, Jim?
This is solid.
Good. So our first speaker in the afternoon is Jim McAdams. I will not introduce Jim, you all know Jim, love Jim and respect Jim. And he was originally planning to talk about Father Hesper, but then left this slot for Father Jim. And we now talk about Waldemar Gurian, and we are very excited to hear Jim. Here we go.
Obviously, Father Jim should talk about Father Hesper. I'm going to talk about somebody who I'd be surprised if any of you know the name. I learned the name only after a while, Waldemar Gurian. And so Waldemar Gurian was a Catholic publicist and the Catholic professor, their initials. One day, if I could tell a story, I was looking through the library, and particularly at the Review of Politics, which is a prominent journal of political theory that has been produced at Notre Dame since 1939. And I was amazed to see who had written for this journal. And I looked at the editor's name, Waldemar Gurian, and my immediate question was, who is Waldemar Gurian? Who is this man? Waldemar Gurian was a Russian Jew. He was born in St. Petersburg. He fled oppression there with his mother, and they converted to Catholicism in Berlin. He was a student of Max Scheler, a phenomenologist, and also, strangely, Carl Schmitt, whom I'm sure he didn't like after a while. And he was a fierce critic of the Nazis, a fierce critic, openly, defiantly. And as a result, the Nazis went after him, and in 1933 he fled to Switzerland, where he produced a fairly modest weekly magazine called Die Deutsche Briefe, the German letters, again, fiercely communist. And finally, at the invitation of the president of the University of Notre Dame, John O'Hara, I think it's John, right? O'Hara. He joined a unique group of European refugees and exiles, who were enormously talented, and created an atmosphere at this time at the University of Notre Dame that I think was one of our greatest moments. There's a tendency for my university to say, well, every day and every way we get better. And that's not necessarily true. That isn't how history works. But this was one of the most electric moments in the history of the University of Notre Dame. And in 1939, who had written for it. And so I thought, well, I'm going to collect these essays. You can't really read their names, but I'll tell you about two of them in a minute. I'm going to collect these essays and, well, publish them, renew people's interest in them. If you know Hungarian, the book in a shortened form is in Hungarian. I'm sure many of you know Hungarian. And Chinese, if you know Chinese. And what for me was extraordinary about these names is they weren't all Catholics. Sure, there were Catholics, but there were also Jews, Protestants, non-believers, all different kinds of major intellectuals, such as Gurian's friend. One slide. Oh, there he is, by the way. A very stern-looking guy who was very different and very Central European when he was at Notre Dame. Always wore a three-piece suit, was very proper, formal, and as well. Among his friends, Hannah Arendt, the young Hannah Arendt, who he promoted as a young woman, and she published in the Review of Politics a series of essays on totalitarianism, which became one of the major books on the theme of totalitarianism. Very close friend of Gurian. And then also a second close friend, Jacques Maritain. Jacques Maritain, I'm sure you all know the name. One of my problems in publishing this collection of essays was, what do I do with the fact that there are 20 essays by Jacques Maritain? And so in the book, I only included maybe 4 of them. But one, which is particularly important, written in 1939, about the concept of integral humanism. Now, this was the question, or remains the question for me. It would be one thing to publish a journal at a Catholic university with the editor a Catholic, and simply publish Catholics, simply because the Catholics would want to publish it. And so the question is, why did all of these other people? Hannah Arendt was a secular Jew. Marek Babic was, of course, Catholic. But you look at the list of all these people. Why is it that they felt so comfortable with this journal? And why would they publish some of their greatest essays? And so I have reflected on that, and I've been challenged in one way, in that when Gurian became the editor of the Review of Politics and devoted himself to this, he stopped writing. He didn't write nearly as much as he had before. And so that was a challenge. But what I identified, and some of you have seen Marquez sent it out as a PDF, he published an essay in 1931 called The Catholic Publicist. The Catholic Publicist, which for me has all of the components of why the Review of Politics was a success in reaching out to people who weren't simply Catholic. And I want to talk about it for a couple of minutes, but at the same time, I want to lead up to another point, which is that we can go back and we can look at the Catholic publicist, and we can get some wonderful ideas, enlightening ideas about the role of the Catholic professor. So why was this journal so appealing? The general theme of Gurian's essay is that the Catholic publicist had an opportunity and a responsibility to write about the crises of the age in a way that a secular publicist never could. And he looked at the prominent not just publishers, but it's public intellectuals. He looked at the major figures that were like he. And what he said is the reason, or one of the fundamental reasons that we have this crisis in Europe of Nazism, this is 2 years before Hitler comes to power, and of Stalinism. The reason we have this is that the secular publicist has lost track with what counts. The secular publicist is too eager to please his audience and to please his, as Gurian called them, his bourgeois masters. That the secular publicist has just become, this is the word he used, a lackey or a servant of the age, of the zeitgeist. And so then what Gurian did in this essay was to present a challenge, and he embodied it, and I don't know who else embodied it among the world of journalists, but he presented an argument that would later explain why the Review of Politics was so successful and so engaging for so many people. And it's a very simple argument. The first part of the argument is the Catholic publicist has an obligation and an opportunity to pursue the truth, and to pursue the truth in a way that is different than positivism, utilitarianism, instrumental philosophies. All of those approaches to modernity, which in his way, his argument, weaken the will of intellectuals in the face of the challenges of totalitarianism. And so what he argued is for this obligation to pursue the truth. And in a minute I'll suggest not to act as though you have the truth, but to pursue it. And I think this was one of the factors that attracted people like Hannah Arendt, Jacques Maritain, and then on and on and on. Because they had the same attitude. Their attitude was that the modern world had encouraged intellectuals to think very superficially about their responsibility, and to think about the challenges of totalitarianism and other movement philosophies in ways that made them incapable of understanding what had happened with, well, Gurian would say, like Maritain, what had happened to the conceptions of the human person that would have pointed them in another direction. So that's the first reason. The second reason is this. Gurian was a strong critic of liberalism. I don't think in the sense that, of John Stuart Mill, but he was a critic of the kind of weak liberal democracy, or commitment to liberal democracy, that was epitomized by the Weimar Republic. And he held these new democratic leaders, Christian Democrats, Social Democrats, responsible for the rise of fascism. But his argument was, and this is where he's consistent with the best trait of liberalism, his argument was we should pursue the truth, but we don't necessarily know the truth. The Catholic Church inspires us to do this, and the Catholic Church is the repository of the truth, or maybe not the church, but that is its mission. And Gurian said instead, we need to be aware of the fact that we're all human, we have different perspectives, we have different ways of pursuing the truth. are obliged to be humble, simply in recognizing what we don't know. Because on this basis, then, we can talk to each other, and we can figure out how we can collectively respond to the challenges of our age, as Maritain called it, the crisis of modern times. And this was also very attractive to the contributors to the Review of Politics, because they were so different. If you read Hannah Arendt and compare her with Jacques Maritain, very different. And this was true of Josef Pieper, Denise de Rougemont, Leo Strauss, many, many people. But this created a climate in which people were just curious to get together and to think collectively about how to have a real response to the challenges of the age, how to provide an alternative to utilitarianism, to positivism. And so literally they would do that. This is what made Notre Dame electric in a way that people have forgotten. Literally, they would come to Notre Dame and they would get together and talk to each other. And Gurian's wife, his wife did everything because he was Central European.
Just go on.
In a kind of Viennese way, even though he was from Berlin. But they just gather with him and talk to each other. So Hannah Arendt knew Jacques Maritain, knew Gilles Sonne, knew John Uneff, and on and on and on, all of these different people. Always aware of the need that they be humble in the pursuit of truth, and use that as a basis for talking with each other. But interestingly, Gurian also said another thing. You see this in the essay, and I love it. Gurian says, in fact, the pursuit of truth does not mean that we should be genteel. It does not mean that we should be polite. It does not mean that in the face of untruth or the face of inhumanity, we should act as though all views are good. We should not be genteel. That is the character of the secular publicist. Somebody who just thinks that, well, he has one view and other people have other views, and everything is good. Gurian said to these people, it matters what we think, and we must have the courage to assert it. And these people were, in so many cases, like Hannah Arendt, they were refugees of totalitarian regimes. And this was the language they wanted to hear. Because they didn't want people to tell them that what was happening in Europe was just a matter of opinion, or a matter of different perspectives. They wanted to hear that being genteel was a sign of weakness. So finally, why does this matter today? So I've got three different periods here. I have 1931 as the essay. I have the Review of Politics, founded in 1939. And then there's today for the Catholic professor. Well, I think, first of all, it is essential, and it is one of our greatest advantages at Catholic universities, that we are about pursuing the universal. We don't have the premise, we don't operate on the premise that somehow, every perspective is true. Every perspective is good and just. Anything goes. I just want to show something with my hands. No, not like that. Well, no, we'll put them up. We'll put them up. Because I want to say, I'm thinking about this in terms of our leaders. So John Jenkins on the left, and Boris Kutsiak, two great leaders. Boris Kutsiak on the right. One thing I learned when I came to Notre Dame after teaching at secular universities is that at the secular university, when you think about the pursuit of truth, they say, well, you have to be objective, you have to be neutral, you can't take a firm stand on anything, and don't tread on other people's turf. And what I learned at Notre Dame is that when they look at Notre Dame, they think, well, that doesn't have anything to do with truth. That's bias, that's religious bias. But what I learned at Notre Dame is that the secular image of truth at my former universities is like this. It's just as an attitude, because it's so protected, doesn't want to insult anybody. Whereas at a Catholic university, the pursuit of truth can be like this, and open to all different perspectives. Which is, of course, the second point that I wanted to make, which is, and it's something that we experience in our discussions. We definitely have to be open to the idea that we don't know everything. And Notre Dame in particular has to be open to this idea, because sometimes we act like we know everything, and we definitely don't. We have to be open to the idea that we're all people who need a certain intellectual humility. And by acting on that basis, then we can talk to each other, but we can also talk to people who do not share our faith. That's crucial. It is, I was thinking, as I was listening to the earlier presentations, it's a kind of intellectual ecumenism. But then finally, and equally important today, is we have to have the guts to speak the truth. I mean, we live in an age where, of post-truth or non-truth, where people have to act like, everything should be fair and balanced, and you should listen to all views. Fair and balanced is the theme of Fox News, Evil Empire, Fox News. And, but we don't have to be fair and balanced, because some things are just true. And whether it's dealing with COVID or the future of democracy or global climate change, we as professors need to tell our students the truth to the best that we can. We can't act like, well, people have different opinions. And so, again, we can be friendly, we can be flexible, we can be open-minded, but as Gurian would say, we can't be genteel. And this is where the great Catholic leaders come in, because they have all the qualities that Gurian sought. And just to give you a picture, fine, but don't do it, of one great Catholic leader who is an alumnus of the Nanovic Institute for European Studies. Here is my concluding example. Almost a bishop. Thank you.
Thank you. Almost a bishop. Thank you, Jim. It's favorite people afternoon. Following Jim will be Marek Babic. He will talk about Jozef Ďurček. And I don't know how the PowerPoint works. Here's a master. So you take the bishop down. Oh, just a second. I give you the mic. Let's give a welcome to Marek.
Thank you very much. Yes.
You want to move yourself?
So it's my pleasure to present you, from my point of view, the most important man who deserves that we are now in this beautiful Catholic university. And his name is Jozef Ďurček. I'm a historian, so I will tell you a very simple history of our university, very short history, and I will tell you something about the history of Jozef Ďurček. Slovakia is a country with a rich tradition of higher education. On its territory in Bratislava, the first university was established already in the 15th century, known as Academia Metropolitan. At the beginning of the 17th century, the University of Trnava was founded by Emperor Ferdinand II. The first modern Slovak university, Comenius University in Bratislava, was established by Wolff in 1919. Since 1948, the communists took power in Czechoslovakia. The entire educational system in Czech Republic and Slovakia has been under the political influence of the Communist Party. The humanities suffered the most because in them the orders of the government were intensively promoted by Marxist-Leninist ideology in a spirit hostile to religion and especially to the Catholic Church. At all levels of schools, teachers were trained in the spirit of scientific atheism and couldn't publicly practice their religious faith. As a result, entire generation of Catholic intellectuals from earlier periods gradually disappeared, and new one grew up in secret with very limited opportunities to receive a good humanities education within the Republic. The pressure of the communist regime on Slovak schools was strong, persistent, and often cruel. However, despite absolute political power, the communists were unable to remove religious people from the school system. Although many teachers went through Marxist education, they quietly kept their faith. If they somehow expressed themselves in public as believers, they were not dismissed from their jobs, but they were also prevented from holding leadership positions or achieving higher academic degrees. One such brave Christian intellectual was Jozef Ďurček. He was born in 1930 near Galanta, a small town in southwestern Slovakia. In 1942 he began to study at the Catholic grammar school in Trnava, at the time under the strong influence of the Jesuits. Jozef was an active student and led a confessional association of students called the Marian Congregation. He was its chairman until the closure of the grammar school by the communists in 1950. Jozef chose university studies of natural sciences. In 1950, he enrolled at the Faculty of Natural Sciences of Comenius University in Bratislava, where he decided to study mathematics and physics. It was a scientific area where communists couldn't impose their ideology and political views. After successfully completing his studies, he worked at a scientific institute in Prague, and in 1961 he started working at the University of Transport and Communication in Žilina as an assistant professor. He convinced the academic community of his professional qualities, and in 1969 he was able to complete a one-year study stay in Paris, which was not so common under the communists. Only those who showed the highest scientific qualities were allowed to travel to Western Europe, considered a hostile world by the communists at the time. After returning from Paris, the communists prevented him from being appointed associate professor because he supported the 2000-word appeal of the signatories. Only after the fall of the communist regime in 1989 was Jozef Ďurček able to achieve the academic positions that belonged to him due to his professional qualities. He was elected head of the Department of Physics and inaugurated as a professor in 1993. As a renowned professor, he came to Ružomberku, you can see. In 1995, Ružomberku is the metropolis of a Lower Liptov region with a strong Catholic background. The most famous native is Andriy Mykhaleyko, a Catholic priest, one of the leading figures of the Slovak national movement at the beginning of the 20th century. Catholic education here had a rich historical tradition that the communists couldn't suppress even during the 4 decades of their dictatorship. Shortly after the fall of the communists, Catholic schools of all levels, except the university, were established in Ružomberku. After his arrival in Ružomberku, Professor Ďurček was involved in the preparation for the establishment of a new Catholic university-type school. At that time, a demand for education and training of a new generation of teachers grew in an environment unencumbered by the communist past. Catechists and teachers of religion were especially needed at the time because at the beginning of the 90s there was a renaissance of interest in theological disciplines and religious issues in Slovakia. From the beginning, Jozef Ďurček worked closely with the Slovak bishops, especially František Todra and Rudolf Baláš, you can see them there, as well as with the local church in Ružomberku. Dean Kostelanský was a very important person. He used his reputation as an internationally renowned scientist to attract excellent experts from all over Slovakia to the small district town. In 1995, the Pedagogical Institute of St. George was first established. The following year, the institute became the Catechetical and Pedagogical Faculty of Trnava University. In 1997, this faculty was incorporated into the University of Žilina, and from the very beginning, Jozef Ďurček headed these institutions either as director or as dean. The process culminated on July 1st, 2000, when the Catholic University in Ružomberku began to function as a non-state university with 2 faculties. Jozef Ďurček was the creator of the first statute of the Catholic University. The establishment of the Catholic University in Ružomberku in 5 years was a minor miracle in the Slovak condition. The university was founded on a green field with very modest financial and human resources. Growth in the first 5 years was incredibly dynamic and tumultuous. You can see that in 2001 there were just 600 students, and 5 or 4 years later there were almost 10,000 students. The success of the extremely rapid development of the Catholic University lay in several factors. One of them were personalities who gave the Catholic University a unique character. These personalities were deeply rooted in God and His love, and from Him they drew inspiration and strength to overcome all obstacles. From the beginning, they believed that the Catholic University was God's work, that it had an important mission, and they transferred this conviction to those around them. I believe that Jozef Ďurček was the key figure who laid a solid foundation for the Catholic University and left an important legacy for future generations. From my point of view, the key word is modesty or humbleness. Several colleagues and students who collaborated with Professor Ďurček from the beginning highlighted the one characteristic that was typical for Jozef Ďurček. It was modesty. He himself had a quite introverted nature, but this didn't lead him to individualism and detachment from others. He was one of those people who commanded respect for his erudition, but at the same time for his personal accessibility and gentleness. He knew how to stimulate people with arguments and knowledge, but at the same time he didn't act as a leader who knows everything, know it all. He was an advocate of the motto verba movent, exempla tramunt. He repeated that without personal sacrifices it is impossible to build great things, that sometimes it is necessary to act selflessly. He himself worked for minimum salary and in isolation from his own family. Kindness. I was lucky enough to experience the beginnings of the university and to meet Professor Ďurček several times. At that time, I was a recent graduate of the University of Bratislava and taught Latin language in Ružomberku. The professor belonged to the old school and spoke Latin, among other languages. He had no problem talking to me several times about the importance of Latin culture and about the relevance of classical culture in the modern world. I was 24 years old at that time, and during the conversation I felt his charisma and amazing human dimension, above all kindness. Basically, he has a slight smile on his face always. Goodness, the professor was not ashamed of his deep piety. Students and colleagues met him regularly in the university chapel, and he didn't miss any religious celebrations. He did not hesitate to open academic events or warm meetings with prayer. This was something completely exceptional and new in Slovak condition in mid-90s. His passion was to point to God's hand in creation, and he did it with the authority of an internationally renowned physicist. He organized faculty-wide seminars where various aspects of God's presence in the world and among people were discussed. Students and colleagues intensely perceived this dimension of his personality, and gradually he gained not only respect, but also love from the entire academic community. Next is family atmosphere. Almost all those who experienced the first year of the Catholic University in Ružomberku under the leadership of Professor Ďurček agree that there was a great family atmosphere in the academic community. Both students and teachers formed one small community, all knowing each other by name. Professor Ďurček's charismatic personality made a paternal impression. The combination of wisdom, modesty, kindness, and piety in his person was so intense that no one doubted God's help in building the Catholic University in Ružomberku. Vision and mission. The first years after the establishment of the Catholic University, there was a dynamic, extensive growth of this institution. Professor Ďurček didn't accept this fact with excitement. He has always prioritized quality education over quantity. The growing number of students and teachers threatened the family atmosphere of the university. Quote, the perspective of the university will depend on its ability to maintain its fidelity, Catholic identity, and at the same time the quality of education. It was the main mission from him. By contrast, he didn't want the university to become an exclusive club only for the best students from the rich families. He reiterated that the Catholic University must be open to students from socially disadvantaged families and poorer regions of Slovakia. He took great care to ensure that the university didn't become just a regional institution closed in on itself. He himself had a wealth of international experience, and from the beginning he used many friendships in Europe and in the United States of America to attract visiting scientists to the small town in Ružomberku, and vice versa. He allowed many from Ružomberku to travel to the best universities in Europe and America. Jozef Ďurček's message, I will quote, history teaches us that the great works, such as the building of a university, cannot be realized without people passionate about the cause, faithful ideals, and willing personal sacrifices. Our university is still a young institution, but it has already managed to undergo turbulent development, from humble beginnings to extensive growth and again to reduction. In recent years, the university has been going through a multidimensional crisis caused by many factors, for example, demographic decline in Slovakia, or non-systematic funding, or instability of legislation, or something like that. That is why it is necessary and useful to be inspired by the life and professional stories of the people who stood at the foundation of our university. Professor Ďurček was a founder, enthusiast, a visionary, but most important, a wise, humble and selfless person. I believe that here is the key to the future of the university. Wisdom, modesty and commitment. Professor Ďurček was the benchmark for these qualities. In the recent weeks I read a very interesting book. The name of this book is From Good to Great. Maybe you know it. Jim Collins wrote this book. And it was very interesting for me, this reading, because Jim Collins pointed that the leaders of the most successful companies in the USA or in the world are not some extrovert celebrities or something like that, but most of them, they are very smart, humble and shy people. It was very interesting for me to read this, and when I read this book, I imagined always Jozef Ďurček. Jozef Ďurček, this was before my eyes when I read this book, From Good to Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marek. Thank you very much, Marek. We take you away. You cannot build great things without sacrifices. Now we move from Slovakia to Hungary. We move from the 20th century back in the past, which is very much present and important. So, Father Christian Vince, Vice Rector from the Peter Franzmann University, will talk about its name-giving cardinal.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I am very joyful to be here, and thank you for the possibility to speak about the Cardinal Peter Franzmann. My English is not perfect, but my text is written, and I am very calm, and I have prepared some pictures for the presentation, so I hope you can easily follow my presentation. I am very thankful for the presentation from Marek for more reasons. One reason is that at the beginning of your presentation, we have already seen the picture of Franzmann Peter. I will return back to this view. Thank you. The Franzmann Peter Catholic University in Budapest has been in its present form for 30 years, but it sees itself as the successor to the university founded by Cardinal Peter Franzmann in 1635 in Nagyszombat, today known as Trnava in Slovakia. The Faculty of Theology has been in continuous operation since the foundation, while other faculties have been separated from the university founded by the Cardinal and transformed into other universities. The Faculty of Theology thus carries on the intellectual legacy of Peter Franzmann in an unbroken continuity. Franzmann University was transferred to Buda in 1767 and then to pass during the reign of Maria Theresa. Today in Hungary, in Budapest, the Eötvös Loránd University of Sciences, the Semmelweis University of Medicine, and of course here in Slovakia, the University of Trnava also consider themselves successors. Our university, the Franzmann Peter Catholic University in Budapest, in its present form, includes the Faculty of Information Technology and Bionics, the Faculty of Law and Political Science, the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, and the Postgraduate Institute of Canon Law, in addition to the Faculty of Theology mentioned above. By 2027, we hope to have a new campus, which will allow several important offices, classrooms, lecture halls, and the central library to be located in the city center. Every year, we commemorate the founding of our university on Franzmann Day with celebrations and conferences during the second week of October. In my presentation today, I would like to talk about the founder himself, Peter Franzmann, his personality, his activities, and the founding of the university. Although the distance in time may seem great, the person and merits of Peter Pázmány are always important to us, while his person comes close to us again and again in a kind of actualization. We can start. Before I talk about Peter Pázmány, I would like to briefly refer to the situation in Hungary at the time when the cardinal founded the university. In the early 1520s years, the Ottomans attacked the southern Hungarian castle and fortress system with great vigor, and after many years of bloody fighting, they successfully broke through. The fall of Nándorfehérvár, today Belgrade, the southern gateway to the medieval kingdom of Hungary, took place in August 1521. This was followed by the inland invasion in 1526, which led to the defeat at Mohács and the subsequent breakup of the unified kingdom of Hungary. In 1541, the Ottoman Empire occupied Buda. This split the kingdom of Hungary into three parts: the Habsburg kingdom of Hungary, the kingdom of Eastern Hungary, later the Principality of Transylvania, and then the province occupied by the Turks. In the 17th century, the fate of the Hungarian people was complicated both by their vulnerability to Turkish rule and by the tension between Catholic and Protestant churches and political aspirations. In fact, the Catholic Church in Hungary seemed to be in its last days and would soon disappear altogether. In view of the opposition between Catholic and Protestant, the foundation of our university was of course an important moment of re-Catholicization. In view of the Turkish rule, it was of course a hope for the survival and perseverance of the Hungarian people. Universities were, of course, the most important institution of intellectual and scientific life in Europe. In fact, the Hungarian people had universities quite early on, but unfortunately, they were on Veszprém, for example. There was a law college as early as the 13th century, which most historians regard as the first Hungarian university. Unfortunately, in 1276, Péter Csák's forces wreaked terrible havoc on the building, which, according to later documents, had a sacristy with a room filled with nothing but books. The number of books is remarkable, since at that time the French King Philip August had only 21 volumes, and the Abbot Otto of Chambly had 150 books, the later being a famous library in the West at the time. The second Hungarian university was founded in Pécs in 1367, nearly to the same time as the foundation of the University of Heidelberg and Cologne. The University of Óbuda was founded in 1389, at the same time as the University of Erfurt. However, the institution founded by King Sigismund only existed until 1415. The fourth Hungarian city to establish a university was Bratislava, Poznan. King Matthias asked Pope Paul II for permission to establish it in 1465 with the famous phrase, "Hungary, though a great and fertile country, has few educated people, it has no university." The University of Bratislava Poznan was not complete either. The division of Hungary into three parts by the Turks and the deepening political and religious struggles diverted attention from the university. Only the beginning of the 17th century brought the possibility of change with the action of Péter Pázmány. Péter Pázmány was born in 1517 in Oradea, today in Romania. His father was a deputy bailiff and a Protestant. In 1582, he was admitted to the Jesuit College in Cluj-Napoca, in Romania, the most modern and internationally established educational institution of the Principality of Transylvania, where he became Catholic. In 1588, he joined the Society of Jesus, whose members were expelled from the Principality in the same He spent the following years studying in Poland, Vienna and Rome. He was ordained priest in Rome in 1596 and taught philosophy at the College of the Order in Graz for 4 years. In 1600, he was posted to the Kingdom of Hungary, first to the college in Sala, Vágselye, later to the Jesuit mission station in Košice, Kassa. Between 1603 and 1607, Pázmány taught again in Graz, this time scholastic theology, and was awarded his doctorate there. In the following years, as Cardinal of the Hungarian Church, Péter Pázmány implemented the reforms of the Council of Trent. He held several diocesan and national synods in the city of Trnava. He put into effect the decisions of the Council of Trent and introduced the liturgical books Missale Retiarium Romanum, which had become obligatory after the Universal Council. To consolidate church discipline, he carried out canonical visitations in the parishes of the Diocese of Esztergom. The Cardinal received financial support from Catholic aristocrats for representative building projects, and by 1637, the first Baroque church in Hungary was built in Trnava. The church was known as a Jesuit or university church, and is now known as the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. The Cardinal died in Bratislava, in 1637, and was buried in the Cathedral of St. Martin there. His grave was rediscovered in 2010. Péter Pázmány was a persistent and thorough organizer. He saw that there was only one way to cultivate the neglected Hungarian soul in a Catholic spirit through education. And the school was the means to this end. Having successfully obtained both ecclesiastical power and material wealth, he devoted all his energies to the establishment of schools. From the power of education, from the power of culture, he expected the Catholic and Hungarian destiny to change for better. With his first income, he founded a seminary in Vienna, which is still known as the Collegium Pázmányum. By his own admission, he worked day and night on how to train a sufficient number of educated priests. He financed the study of priestly students in Olmütz, Rome, Braunschweig, and in Graz. The idea of founding a university took him a long time to mature. By the 1630 years, the Jesuit college in Trnava, a convent for the youth, and a seminary for priests, also in Trnava, were already available as an institutional background. The Cardinal also managed to secure the financial means for this period. The Cardinal Archbishop signed the Charter of the University of Trnava on 12 May 1635, after obtaining the approval of Emperor and King Ferdinand II. Education began in the Faculty of Philosophy, Humanities, by the Faculty of Theology for students of the priesthood who had completed their studies in philosophy, began its work in 1638. The Faculty of Law was not opened until 1667, and the Faculty of Medicine was established much later, in 1769, when the university was already in Buda. There were financial reasons why the law and medical faculties were not started until later, the Cardinal simply not yet being able to provide the necessary financial conditions. According to the text of the founding charter, the primary aim of the university was to tame the spirit of a warlike nation, and to train men fit for church government and the service of the state. The charter explains that the Archbishop and his successors may interfere in the course of lectures, the selection of the curriculum, and even the assessment of the suitability of the teachers set. The university was granted all the privileges and rights of German universities, such as Cologne, Ingolstadt, or Vienna. Pázmány entrusted the university entirely to the Jesuit monks and declared that if the country was liberated from Turkish rule, the university would be transferred to another town in the diocese of Esztergom. This happened later during the reign of Maria Theresa. Péter Pázmány fought Protestantism exclusively by literary means. He published many debating papers, some of which he wrote under a pseudonym. In these treatises, he argued for the Catholic belief system and presented its correctness as an apologist. It is well known that the religious conflicts of the 1600 years were accompanied by violent church occupations, abductions, abuses, violence against priests and clerics, and the operation of the bloody assizes. Pázmány, however, was firmly opposed to such phenomena, never enduring the use of violence in conversion, always seeking to persuade. Out of the counter-reformation mood of the time, he considered only reasoned debate to be the way forward. He considered it a grave error to believe that the end justified the means and that Protestants should be likened to heathens. Not only did he put pen and ink to the service of recatholization, but he also engaged in converting. The recatholization of the Hungarian aristocracy, which began at this time and was almost completed within a few decades, was obviously also politically motivated, but tradition links the conversion of 30 aristocratic families to Pázmány contribution. In the meantime, he worked to create a state of equilibrium between the Habsburg dynasty and the Principality of Transylvania, maintaining a genuine friendship with the Protestant princes of Transylvania, for example, with Gabriel Bethlen or with George Rákóczi I. The recognition of their power helped the Habsburg to rule in a constitutional manner, in contrast to the other Catholic bishops. He advocated that the monarch should exercise religious tolerance towards Protestants at all costs. An important distinctive feature of his work as an educator was that, in addition to the necessary education of boys, he wrote many texts and took great care in the education of girls. At that time, there was still a mentality that did not consider educating and learning for girls and women to be achievable. Many considered it harmful and dangerous, or at least unnecessary, for girls to learn to read and write. But the cardinal simply argued that, since young children spend the first 8 years of their lives with their mothers, the education of girls and women is crucial. To Bratislava, he invited an order of nuns to educate the girls, and in the renewal of the word, the good morals of girls are almost more important than those of boys. After all, we have all received from our mothers the first guidelines of our lives. It is a caution. An important principle in the education of children and youth was to start as early as possible. Just as tender young tree branches are pliable and soft, so youth is more receptive to the teaching of educators. He ordered all bishops and chaplains to make teaching as widely available as possible. Free education was provided in the Jesuit schools of his own, so that the poor were also educated. Then it was introduced that children of the same age should be in the same class, under the direction of one teacher. In these Jesuit schools, requirements were eventually drawn up, in the light of which a child from one class could be promoted to another class. Seeing the life of the Slavonica Natio in Trnava, he realized that the community could not fit into the small chapel of Saint Michael. To support their religious life and fervor, he donated the Franciscan Church in Trnava for their use. Transylvania was at that time the frontier of Western civilization, to which many Czech Protestants with with a humanist culture had fled. Pázmány supported their admission because he believed that the real enemy was the Turk and not the Protestantism. He knew, recognized and supported all nations and supported many people regardless of their national identity. He stood up for the Croatian youth Marek Babic, called him to Trnava as a teacher and later appointed him as a canon and archdeacon of Komárno. He became a patronizing person and supported the career of the Polish Melchior Grodziecki. There were controversial situations in which he judged that the Slovak was basically more peaceful in nature than the Hungarian. It seems clear to me that we should learn from Péter Pázmány how to re-establish the intellectual integration of nations living side by side. How did Pázmány live his everyday life? Well, a brief sentence from the historian's research, the results of which were published a few years ago, should tell us about this. He always took great care of his surroundings and his sport, and issued detailed instructions for his sport, including economic and earthly rules. The instructions were summarized in 27 points, which testify to meticulous care, thrift, and constant exhortation to order. One of the points envisaged that anyone who missed the Holy Mass would not receive his daily ration of wine. Pázmány kept a garden next to his Archbishop Palace in Bratislava, where he himself gardened and planted trees. He obtained peach shoots and branches from the Turks and grafted them himself. He called the university he founded Benjamin, the youngest of the institutions he founded. In January 1636, 54 students attended the first annual logic lectures of the Faculty of Philosophy, and Pázmány was present to examine them. The Hungarian theological philosophical terminology developed in the light of his work. In his founding letter, Pázmány said of the university, "We entrust this university to the care of our successors, and we offer it to their attention with great affection for its enrichment and elevation. As we do all this with such pure and sincere intentions for the promotion of the Catholic religion and the uplifting of our dearest country, so we beseech the only good God, accept this sacrifice of goodwill and bestow upon our foundation an abundant blessing, that his exalted name may be praised and glorified forever." If I had to formulate some summarizing sentences about the Cardinal Péter Pázmány, I would say the following. Firstly, in his time, in his epoch, he was a really modern man. He had the courage to think in another way, in an extraordinary way. Secondly, he was aware of the power of the Catholic faith in the sense a lot of problems can be solved through the Catholic faith, and all the differences can be harmonized through the Catholic faith, through our Catholic faith. I hope we can continue his work in a worthy way. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Father Christian. And isn't it up to date to think about the task of university to tame the spirit of a warlike nation? Once again, in so many places of this earth. We have a fourth presentation coming up. It's Father Slavomir. Are you leaving the room or are you coming up here? Please don't leave us. Yes, please approach us, Father Slavomir. He decided not to talk about Pope Francis, but about a Polish professor cardinal Pope. Who may that be?
while at the university. And at the end, I would like to say a few words about his teaching at our university, his major crucial ideas of his philosophical ethics. He was a philosopher at the university, and he taught at the Faculty or School of Philosophy, not theology there. Born in Wadowice, May 18th, 1920. It's a small town, relatively small town, still bigger now than before, with 10,000 inhabitants. Including in those 10,000 inhabitants, there were about 3,000 Jews, which is quite often emphasized. And that means a lot for his understanding of the world, religions, our relations with Jews, and so on. Baptized Karol Józef. His father was also Karol Senior. His mother Emilia died when he was 8 or 9, more or less. So when he had his first Holy Communion, his mother was not with him here. His father Karol Senior was a lieutenant in the Polish army. He had one brother, older brother, Edmund, who was a doctor, medicine doctor, and he died a couple of years later. Karol also had a sister who was born and died before he was born. That was quite remarkable. I remember when I was reading his private last will after he died, the Pope. He mentioned in that will that I'm looking forward to heaven to see my sister, whom I have never seen on earth. His primary and secondary education was in Wadowice. Karol and his father moved to Kraków, big city in southern Poland, in 1938, a year before the Second World War. He started his studies in Polish literature and Polish language at the Jagiellonian University there. He studied it for 1 year only. And then he left the university and started to work in a factory. He was thinking about becoming a priest already in those days. The factory was Solvay chemical factory at the outskirts of Kraków. And then his father died. That was 1941. So in 1941 he became an orphan. He had no close family at all. Soon afterwards, and that was probably in 1942, that he joined the clandestine seminary and followed underground clandestine classes in philosophy and theology, still continuing his work, physical work at the Solvay and the Solvay factory. And then Prince Adam Sapieha, who was Archbishop and Cardinal of Kraków, a great man, a great figure, admired by many, and by the Pope himself as well. One day he decided to gather all the seminarians who lived outside of the seminary. There was no formal seminary in those days of the Second World War. But one day he decided, the Prince Cardinal, to gather them all in his house, in his palace, to defend them, to protect them. In 1944, in July, the Soviet army was moving through Poland from the east towards west, towards Berlin. And in July 1944, it was in Lublin, my city, where the first communist government was established after the Second World War. Later it was moved to Warsaw, but the first was in Lublin. When they established that government, and we knew, Polish people knew that something new was coming. The rector of our university, the university was founded in 1918, started to teach in September, October 1944, well before the end of the Second World War. Our university was the first to offer classes to students, the first university in Poland. Karol Wojtyła was ordained a priest in the cathedral in Kraków, which Wawel Castle, Royal Castle, as we say, beautiful one. On November the 1st, 1946, his bishop, Cardinal Sapieha, Prince, knew that he was a very smart boy, so he decided to send him to Rome immediately. So he was not sent to any parish, to the pastoral ministry, but to Rome, where he studied at St. Thomas University and completed his doctorate there in St. John of the Cross. It was about the concept of faith in the writings of St. John of the Cross. After 2 or 3 years, he came back to Poland, and then, being a young priest, the prince, the cardinal, assigned him to the parish of Niegowic, which was a very tiny place, not very near Krakow. And some say, even now, that it was a surprising act from the bishop, archbishop, sending so well-educated young priest to a village where nobody knows where it was. But it was very smart, very wise of the bishop. He was in Rome, he knows what Rome is all about, he knows the world in a sense. But he should also remember that there are villages and parishes like Niegowic. He was there 1 year, and then he transferred him to Krakow, to St. Florian's parish. While in that church in Krakow for a couple of years, Wojtyła decided to continue his studies, now more in philosophy, and it was at the Jagiellonian University. In those days, there was still the faculty of theology there. You may know, perhaps, or may not know, that in Poland we have the so-called German system, that academic system. That means that after your doctorate, you are supposed to do another degree, which is habilitation. And he had to do it to become later a professor. So he did another degree, habilitation degree, and the theology faculty at the Jagiellonian University completed it in 1953. As they say, his habilitation was the last one at that faculty of theology, because soon afterwards the communists closed faculty of theology at the Jagiellonian University, which they had since the very beginnings of the 14th century. And the same happened in Warsaw, the University of Warsaw, the biggest university in Poland. So after his habilitation, he did his habilitation in philosophy, in Max Scheler, German philosopher, phenomenology. In 1954, a year later, he decided to find a place where he could teach himself. And the only place where he could teach was Lublin, Catholic University of Lublin, because that was the only non-state-owned, non-communist university in the whole of the country. Not only in the whole of the country, as we know. So he came to Lublin in 1954 and started to teach there, which he continued until he became Pope. He became Pope in 1978, as we know. His classes, first classes, and later were, for instance, his first year of classes, in 54, 55, were at the Faculty of Philosophy, for instance, on the history of ethical doctrines, human act, and ethical experience. And there was also a seminar class. So when he came to Lublin, to the university, that was his application. And he was, of course, accepted. Though, as they say, I don't know it myself. When I came to the university, as a seminarian, to study philosophy and theology, that was 1979, a year after he became Pope, so I never met him at the university. But always, for years later, they would say there was some kind of a tension between Wojtyła and his phenomenology, German philosophy and so on, and what he met in Lublin, which was he was consecrated an auxiliary bishop in Krakow. A few years later, when the then Archbishop died, he was appointed Archbishop of Krakow, the head of the Diocese of Krakow. That was 1963. As we know, from 62 until 65, we had the Second Vatican Council in Rome. And there was a group of Polish bishops that were allowed to go and be there every year. As we know, we had the so-called Vatican II sessions every autumn since 62 until 65. He was there always as a young bishop first and then Archbishop of Krakow. In 67, he was appointed a cardinal by Pope Paul VI, of course. And then, on the 16th of October, 78, he was elected Pope and became John Paul II. When he was at the council, he would keep in touch with the university also, not just with his diocese, which is obvious. And that's the first letter of greetings that he sent from Rome, from the council, to the rector of the university and to the academic community of the university. He would attend different celebrations, not just classes, teaching, but celebrations at the university. That's one of the pictures of the year 1964. When we had the so-called, for many years every year, the university organized the so-called theological and pastoral instructions for priests from all over the country, from all over Poland. They were the so-called study days organized at our university. It was very often that he was invited to come and speak at those meetings. Sitting and listening, not only speaking but also listening. That was again 64. Excuse me. In 1966, Poland celebrated so-called the Millennium of Christianity in Poland. Historically, Poland became a Christian country in the year 966. So 1966 was the Millennium of Christianity in Poland. There were celebrations everywhere in Poland. Though of course it was the communist time, it was difficult to do it, but still everywhere, in the diocese, even in parishes, also at the university, we had such celebrations. And that was in 1966 that he was at those celebrations present at the university. As you probably are aware, our Catholic University of Lublin in Poland is the only Catholic university in Poland. When I heard some time ago that in the United States there may be 250 Catholic universities or colleges of higher education, I was quite surprised. And people, when they find out that in Poland, a Catholic country with 38, 39 million people living there, have only one Catholic university, are sometimes surprised, but that's the case. We do have faculties of theology, means Catholic theology, at state universities. All of them together, I believe, about 10 or 11. But the proper Catholic university is only one, the one in Lublin. Third picture was taken in 67, when he was president of the commission doctoral defense of Jerzy Kalkowski, who later became one of his closest collaborators in the Department of Ethics at the Faculty of Philosophy. Kalkowski died only last year. After he became cardinal, he was of course invited to some celebrations also to the university. And it was then that the photo was taken, he was speaking as a newly appointed cardinal. In 68, the university celebrated 50 years of its history Archbishop of Warsaw, Radziszewski. He was for a little bit over 2 years Bishop of Lublin. Just happened. He didn't come from Lublin area, he came from northern Warsaw. But he was appointed Bishop of Lublin in 46, I believe, and stayed with us also as the Grand Chancellor of the university for over 2 years. And then in late 48, he was appointed Archbishop of Warsaw and the Primate of Poland. And later, as I mentioned before, Radziszewski would come to the university many times, very often, to protect the university because of the communism all around, in many ways. And he would repeat that phrase. Somebody told me that. Remember, you are a Catholic university, but if you cease to educate young people to holiness, you will become irrelevant. At the end of every academic year, every professor, head of a department, he was head of the Department of Ethics, Philosophical Ethics. He had to write a report, and that's one of the reports he had to write. It is also here that he mentions, Wojtyła himself mentions his books, of which I will say a few words later. Like Osobnosti in the center of the picture. Osoba in English is the acting person, or some, I think there is another translation into English of that, with the title Person and Act. Anyway, his books, also his Amore e Responsabilità, which is Love and Responsibility, is another book, translated into several languages. Again, him in the university, walking somewhere, quite handsome, young man. 1978, there was a theology congress at the university, and the picture was taken there at that time. This is just by the university. This is the place, the main campus of the university where I teach myself, and Andrzej as well, of course. Again, him, still quite young. He was only 58 when he became Pope in 78. He was born in 1920. In 1974, the then Bishop of Lublin, a friend of his, died, Piotr Paul, and it was Cardinal Wojtyła that was asked to do the funeral. He is to your left, and to the right there is Primate Stefan Wyszyński. It just happens that at the center, the man, white robe in the book, is my professor, who was my supervisor, my doctorate. He is now 96, still in good health mentally, lives in Lublin. And he was in charge of the whole liturgy in those days. That was May 1978, the moment of prayer, reading the office. That was May. In October he was elected. When he was elected Pope in October 78, there was a banner on the facade at the front of the university saying, "Our professor is now Pope."
German is it? Ihr seid Papst.
Yes, ihr seid Papst. And that was his first letter that he sent as Pope to the Rector of the university, with greetings from Rome, from the Vatican, signed on the 27th of October. It's still in the archive of the university, of course, kept there. His major books, this is one of the corridors of the university, which he, of course, was walked not once. But his books, Love and Responsibility, 1960, first edition. Then The Acting Person, 69. And in 72, he published Sources of Renewal. That was something based on the Vatican II, based on the documents of the Vatican II Council, that he thought we should find the sources for our renewal now, the Church in Poland and so on. All the other books, they are not all of them, but most of them, are series or compilations of his essays or lectures that he delivered to students that were subject, human person as a moral subject. Ethics primer and sign of contradiction. That sign of contradiction, published in 1976, was a collection of his sermons, addresses that he delivered at the Vatican during the so-called Lenten retreat for Pope Paul VI. Every year the Pope has special retreats. Ask somebody from the world. It was Pope VI that 2 years before he became Pope invited Wojtyła to do the retreat. And a lot, of course, of his theatre plays. The title is different. He was also a poet. Yes. And now that's when the representatives of the university gathered at St. Peter's Square at the inauguration of John Paul II. That's the first meeting with our university, or representatives of the university, when the Pope came to Poland for the first time. That was June 1979. Pope was not allowed to come to Lublin. The communist government said no. Not Eastern Poland, too close, in a sense, too close to the Soviet Union. So the group of professors and students went to Częstochowa, Jasna Góra, Shrine of Our Lady, the Black Madonna, where they had a meeting with the Holy Father. That was that meeting. He was finally allowed to come to Poland in 87, to Lublin in 87. That was his third pastoral visit to Poland. And that was June 9th, 1987. And that was the meeting, one of two pictures from that meeting at the university. Yes. And that when he was canonized, there was another banner on the university. Our professor is now a saint. And we could add, it's our turn now. But now I want to say a few words about his philosophy. Is that all right?
McAdams, is it all right? We give him
Just
3 more
a few
minutes.
words.
3 minutes, 6 seconds.
Anyway, his primary philosophical interest was anthropological. That was anthropology, the concept of man, we would say that. It was his conviction that it is up to this anthropological vision that both everyone's shape of life and the life of society depend upon. His principal work in this field was the acting person. His understanding of the human being as a person was in a sense very dynamic. It was not static in the way of Boetius, who said that person is persona est rationalis naturae individua substantia. He would stress that there's some kind of dynamism in the human person. The human being is a person, but it's also becoming a person. So the person having human nature is capable of acting. Human nature manifests itself in the ability to act. A person, he would say, he would stress, is known in his or her actions. That is to say, in his or her lived experiences. An indispensable context for the person is morality. And here come questions like, why be moral? What is a moral experience? What does it mean for man to be a moral agent? Why the human being ought to do something and ought not to do something else? What's that? The human person, as he would say, is by nature a moral person. That means capable of distinguishing between good and evil and acting in accord with it. Every human act is a moral act. Man is not only, that's a quotation, is not only the agent of his acting, he is also the creator of it. Morality and acting, he would say, differ essentially, but at the same time they are so strictly united with each other, morality and acting, that morality has no real existence apart from human acting. It is not difficult see those points of interest in his magisterial teaching later, like, for instance, in Redemptor Hominis, his first encyclical letter, 1979, or perhaps in the serious 5-year series of teaching on the theology of the body, from 79 until 84. Man and Woman, he created that as a title. Or perhaps we could find some quotations from Centesimus Annus, that's another encyclical letter of 1991, where he would speak a lot about the so-called anthropological error. He said, for instance, when speaking about communism or Marxism or socialism, that the fundamental error of Marxism was anthropological in nature, which means that Marxism considers the individual person simply as an element within the social organism. Man is thus reduced to a series of social relationships, and the concept of the person as the autonomous subject of moral decision disappears. Man is created later, just one word, as capable of entering into a covenant, he would say. Human being is a social being, open to others and willing to enter a covenant, not just a relations, but a covenant with the other. First with the other, meaning God himself. So we could say perhaps that Wojtyła's concept of interest, philosophical interest, was anthropocentric. But when we look at his teaching, his understanding of the human person, later in the light of his magisterial teaching as Pope, we would find particularly a very important quotation from Vatican II document, Constitution called Gaudium et Spes, paragraph 22, which says that it is only in the mystery of the Word made flesh, that's Jesus Christ, that the mystery of man truly becomes clear. It is Christ the Lord who fully reveals man to himself and brings to light his most high calling. So finally, his teaching, his philosophy, his theology, his understanding of the human person was not so much anthropocentric as rather Christocentric. And this is a good Catholic conclusion of my presentation. Thank you. One more thing, this is a picture of Karol Wojtyła, Professor Cardinal at Cool at our university, which I want to offer to Marketa and to the Rector to our university.
Take 10 minutes after we come back from the break to see about questions.
Okay.
And because I think the energy in the room makes this plausible. So if we come back in 13 minutes at 4:30 here, that's the break. And then we take 10 minutes for questions with our panelists, and then we move into the last session, which can be a little short. Is that okay?
It's up to you.
It's not up to us.
You are chairman, so it's up to you.
I only chair this. So break until 4:30, starting now. There is this famous saying that we have to work now and then we can rest in all eternity. So, the 4 panelists, I would love to be joined by Father Christian, by Jim, by Father Slavomir, by Marek, if Marek is still around, yes. So please, we will take 10 to 15 minutes for questions, please, just anywhere here. So that every panelist has a fair chance to be grilled by the audience and receive some feedback and some questions. And ideally, we would have one brief question for each panelist. So, who will ask the first question? So, you may remember we talked about 4 different personalities. We have here 4 countries represented. And Father Jim will ask the first question.
Vladimir, I simply must know, did you eventually meet Pope John Paul II?
Personally,
Yes.
I think 2 or 3 times, briefly, but yes. All 3 times in Poland. He visited Poland, I believe 9 times, maybe.
Wow.
Yes, a lot. Usually every 4 or 3 years. So there was one opportunity, I think it was 1991, and the other one a year or 2 later. But briefly I shook hands. He said, Karol Wojtyła, I said, Slavek Milosnes. Yes, so I did, yes.
Thank you. That was not a hard question, but an important question. Yes. The next question, I'm ready to take the next question. You can think about it. I will ask Marek a question. Yes, Marek. The beginning of the university was stellar. The growth rate, I mean, just amazing. And then you mentioned external factors, demographic, legislation, insecurity, and financial reasons. Is there anything internally that you think could have been done, or is something that Ružomberku as an agent can do, that's the founding person you mentioned would have done?
So I'm not sure if I understand the question. The growth of the university. Yes.
The beginning and
the
now
beginning
it's
amazing. Yes, it was really fast, and demography and people devoted to the idea of Catholic University in Ružomberku. Yes, we had 10,000 students at the peak, I think, or more, something in 4 towns or cities in Slovakia. And from then, from 2005, maybe 6, the number of students and teachers and academic community of our university declined. And yes, there are many factors, but the most important, the most key factor is, in my opinion, is demography. We face, as Željko today said in the roundtable, that the demography is very, very crucial problem in this region, not only in Slovakia, but in eastern Slovakia. And yes, for example, many Slovak students who wants to study for the Czech Republic, and many goes to study to Czech because we understand very good each other, Czech and Slovaks. But yes, so that's why we have to put the question again and again, why should we exist furthermore, and what is our mission? What is our mission? So I was very thankful today that we had a roundtable. I was very careful to listen all mentions and all reflections about the situation. And in my opinion, it's my subject that yes, we have to create a small community, not very large, and we have to do things differently. We do not invent new things. We can't struggle with other universities with something new, with something, Tesla or mobile or something like that. But we have to do things differently. We have to be seen as people with passion, with love, with modesty, with humbleness, with piety.
Very much in the spirit of
this is the message of Professor Ďurček. I admire him very much because he was really, he was not celebrating. He didn't meet presidents or international renowned people, but he created an atmosphere of friendship, of family, of pure love from my point of view. So that is the chance for the future, because really many problems we face his financial demography and so on. So thank you, Marek.
Any other question from anyone? The next move is to ask the panelists. Yes, please, Father Salmi. Yes, please.
I want to ask a question, Jim. I hope I'm right to say that you consider yourself more or less as a successor of the Waldemar Gurian, in a way. But more or less what he was teaching and researching is close to you in a way, right? Okay. So, but do you have any young scholars at Notre Dame now who are interested in that line of research and teaching political science? Are there any young scholars that you would consider as your successors?
Oh, sure.
It's not
I can think of one in particular.
Yeah.
Where is he? Here. It's true. It's true. But I think, as you know, with all universities, you have to look for future leaders, and you have to cultivate them, and you have to ask, is this somebody who understands the big picture and is not just ambitious? Because at Notre Dame we have lots of ambition. But you can find these people. We're now in the process of recruiting, it's absolute secret, a former student of ours, one of my students, an undergraduate, was teaching in a major Ivy League university and is quite famous. He's a young guy. So I've already decided that, because of course he will come, but I've already decided he's a future leader. And so I think that's what we all have to do, is we have to be deliberate. You know, we can't wait for it to happen, we have to be deliberate. And then what you also need to do with future leaders is you can't give them anything. What you can do is you can say, here's a space, you are free, we're not going to interfere with you, we're going to give you an opportunity to build something very special, which is very fun.
Thank you, Tim.
But it all starts with him.
A question from Luca.
Okay. I have a question for Father Salmi. First, are you familiar with Rocco Buttiglione and the work of his own? Rocco Buttiglione from
I know the person, I met him.
Okay, no. So my question is quite practical. Do you know on how many or what was the influence of Rocco on John Paul II, the encyclics or some of the writings that he was been making after he became a pope?
So, was Rocco Buttiglione a ghostwriter for John Paul II is the question.
It's only rumors, but I think Rocco Buttiglione was involved in writing particularly social encyclicals, some of them, like Centesimus Annus, Sollicitudo Reis Socialis, perhaps also Laborem Exercens, the first of the social encyclicals. But I do not know details now, but there were rumors that, well, he has always been close to the Pope, that's correct. What they also say is Rocco Buttiglione also, when Wojtyła became Pope, he learned Polish, at least to read it, to understand the Pope's thinking and philosophy, and to read his Polish texts rather than translations into other languages. So Buttiglione speaks quite well Polish, and really can speak as well, yes. And he has visited the university many times, of course, yes.
Thank you. Morgan.
Yes, I have a question for Father Christian.
You mentioned that the Cardinal promoted reasoned discussion with Protestants, right, and promoted religious tolerance rather than sort of antagonistic behavior. And I wonder if you think, based on his actions, how we might encourage this more reasoned discussion today amongst people who have different beliefs than we may. So if you have any thoughts on how to, promote reasonable discussion amongst people rather than antagonistic behavior.
Mike, please. Oh, please.
Can you help me to clear the question?
You may mentioned that the Cardinal wanted to have what we call civilized discussions from people among different fields. How can this happen today? To have good conversation from people who present different ideologies.
A very difficult question. But I mean, we are Catholic universities in order to find this way. If we really have the faith in the power of the Holy Spirit, we have all chance to find the common language to speak with the other peoples. But there are some rules which are very basically, I mean, it is the tolerance, the openness, and then the readiness for the dialogue. Because there were a lot of error in the life of the church in the past. And I mean, frankly speaking, this error was committed by church persons. And we have to avoid these past errors. Well, I teach philosophy, and today was mentioned that the main problem is the problem of the anthropology. And, for me, it is a great question how to find the way to dialogize between the different anthropologies. And it is really very difficult, but if we mean that we know the truth, I hope we are able to find a way to transmit it and then to make it understandable for the other people. But it is always the actual battle, how to find the way. If we know the truth, how can we transmit for the other person?
Thank you for that, Mr. Any other question? I have to say, I mean, we played the game. We had one question, that's good. But here is one more. Yes, please.
I have a question to the professor. I speak a lot. I wonder, there is the monument of Jan Paul II in front of this building.
Over here, yes.
Yeah. And there are a few words. Don't be afraid.
Yes.
Don't be afraid of what? Could you tell us a few words about it?
That's a good question. You can connect it with your hobby. And might for the motto. Don't be afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of what? Connect it to your hobby first.
Probably, yes. It all started in Nazareth, at the Annunciation, when the angel appeared to Our Lady and said to her, "It was God Almighty who sent me to you. You are going to have a son, and that son will be the Son of God." She asked him, "But how can that happen? I have no husband. I don't know my husband. So how can I have a son?" And the response of the angel started with, "Do not be afraid." God knows how, because God is Almighty. And if, from that point of view, if we read the Gospel, the New Testament, the Gospel particularly, about the teaching of Jesus, his words, it is very often Jesus says, even to his apostles, do not be afraid. Peter wanted to walk on the water while they were on the lake. May I? Jesus said, yes, come. And he was walking on the water. And suddenly there was a wind. And he felt the wind, perhaps of the waves around, whatever. And he started to sink. And Jesus grabbed his hand and said, "Why did you," what he said? Why, yes.
Did you doubt?
So why did you doubt? Yes. You believed, you were not afraid when I told you, please come. But then you turned away from me and looked at the world, at the lake, at the waves, and then started to sink. So we are called not to be afraid of anything, even those, today's gospel, who perhaps want to kill our body. That may happen, but the Lord says, do not be afraid.
That's it. Oh, Vasha is giving birth to a song. I just thought it was a great final statement, but here, Vasha.
I have a little difficult question. To everyone. Or whether it would be possible, these great big personalities, how they affect, influence the history. Because the greatness of the persons we estimate through their legacy. Could you, with some notions or some, what is to call how the personalities affect, influence, what kind of the history? What they are as a orientor, give the orientation, or they give some put some thinking, and because how you estimate what is the greatness? I know this is a difficult question, because for me it is interesting because the relation between history and the great persons, how this.
I think there are two questions. One is, how does a person influence history? And the second question is, how do we assess the impact a person had on the history? So I would say 2 sentences per person only, but we go through the line, and then we are done with this one. Please,
as a brief answer, I could say I like this image, this photograph. We as humans, we are in the history, and we are capable to sow seeds in the fields, and in the future we can see how it will grow. And it is to be genuine in a history is that somebody is sown a very good seed, which has a lot of fruit. And regarding Pazman, he's really so away from me. But I must confess, I must say, it was really a genuine acting to sow this seed.
Thank you for the question. Professor McAdams.
I will avoid going into a treatise on philosophy that I've thought a lot about, but I'll just put it quickly. Sometimes we think about a fact as though a great person appears and they push things and then there's an effect and the problem is solved. And I don't think that's true. I think that it's the person who arises and has the confidence to recognize that other people already have them within them, the instinct to live a life of truth and faith. And once they assume that, then their challenge is to bring that out. The second part of this is hope. We live in a really messed up world right now. And for people like me, it's easy to be pessimistic. For other people, there's this kind of forced optimism, which I find strange. But what I tell my students is, don't think about pessimism or optimism, just focus on hope, because that's where human beings have their agency.
Thank you, Jim. Mark.
Thank you. I try to say simple answer. Jozef Ďurček, in my opinion, is an example of a very normal man who could do great things. That he was not such kind of celebrity. He was modest, but a very courageous man. And he put his belief, his trust to people near to him. It was very important. And again, I say, Jozef Ďurček didn't meet John Paul II, or president, or something like that. He was very normal, but he did great things. So this is the message, in my opinion.
Thank you. Ordinary person in extraordinary circumstances.
Yes. Historia est magistra vitae, as we believe. So it's important that we remember. The last book by John Paul II, the title was Memory and Identity. If we remember where we come from, who we are, we will keep our identity, we will know who we are, and then what we are supposed to do, in which way, act this way or that way, and so on. Of course, it is impossible to say how John Paul II has or will influence history, time, peoples, and so on. Sometimes it is difficult to talk about him, but I once tried to talk about John Paul in China. We have good relations with one of the Chinese universities in the big city in central China the university is called Chongqing. You have never heard that name, but what they told me there, I visited that place, they told me this is probably the biggest city in the world. The population of this city is 40 million people. There's a university there, a lot of universities. One of the universities there is called Yangtze Normal University. Yangtze, the river Yangtze goes through that city. I was invited by the rector. I was vice rector of my university, and I was invited there because we wanted to start proper Chinese studies in Lublin at our university, which we now do. And when I went there, they invited me and asked me to do 2 or 3 lectures, open lectures to their students. Of course, there were big halls and a lot of students, 300, 400. And one of the lectures, I wanted to tell them about a little bit of Poland, but particularly about our university. And speaking about our university, I wanted to tell them a little bit about John Paul II. And I showed them on the screen the picture of John Paul II in his white robes. And I asked them, do you know who that guy is? And they said, oh no, we have never seen him. That was about 12 years ago, after he died, after the Pope died. And I thought, how to tell them who he was, in what way? And then what came to my mind was the term chairman. The leader of the Communist Party there in China is the chairman of the party. There are different names for such communist leaders. In Poland it was the first secretary, general secretary in Moscow. Over there is the chairman. And I told them, you see, that guy, there's an organization worldwide, a big one, global one, called the Catholic Church. And that guy is the chairman of that organization, but before he became chairman, he was our professor. I said, oh, now we understand. I realized how deeply, how strongly they are, you know, unable to get out of China in a way. There are some, of course, who travel to America to study everywhere. Also to Lublin. There are some Chinese students there. But most of the people there, they know just China and their own context. How John Paul, in a way, will influence, has his impact on that situation in China, elsewhere, who knows? Time will tell. But exactly 30 years ago, in 1993, John Paul II published his very important encyclical letter called Veritatis Splendor, on the foundations of the moral teaching of the Church. A few years ago, I read a short essay by the former Archbishop of Philadelphia, Charles Chaput, now retired. And in that essay, in one of the American magazines, he was speaking about Veritatis Splendor, what it's all about, what's its message, and so on. And at the last paragraph of the text was something like this. In 50 years, a lot of documents that we now consider in the Church as important will be forgotten. Because the context will be different. We'll need new documents, and new popes will issue new documents. But Veritatis Splendor, he said, will never be forgotten. Never. Why? Because what it says is true. That will be the impact, perhaps.
Father we just wanted to close them. But you have a brief question for the Andrey.
It's getting dark, yes.
Only a short contribution to this discussion. Cardinal Bosnich used to say that Christianity teaches us that the people do not create history, but the people are history. Also, to understand history, the doing of our personalities, our founders, it is important to study personalities. Because behind the acts, behind the history, we must discover always the persons, the people, the personalities. And without understanding these personalities, we cannot understanding our history.
Beautiful. You don't have to comment. This is a beautiful segue to our last session. Thank you, dear panelists. We take a 12 seconds break. Don't stand up. Please. Share this very last session. So it's entitled Evaluation and Conclusion of the Conference, Setting Visions for the Future Development of Catholic Universities. And we will take 20 minutes for that and then give the word to Barchetta for the last words of our gathering. So we have 20 minutes for this session. And obviously we will not do an evaluation in the sense of this was good, this was not good. This is not the language game I would like to play. I would like to say first, thank you for an amazing gathering. The hospitality was really breathtaking. We will thank you tonight. And bringing people together is an art, and making people feel comfortable at home. I took 4 main lessons with me from the topic. And then we can share our insights. First is what Father Andrey just said, the role of persons in institutions, or the role of agents in history, and how important it is that you have people who shape institutions and have this lasting impact, sometimes indirectly, sometimes directly. Secondly, the art of storytelling. I have to say I was in many a boring conference in my long life. And this was a wonderful place to be because listening to stories, there is so much more than you talk about the person. You talk about the whole context. You talk about the world of ideas. You talk about, faith challenges and inspirations. So I think really this storytelling brings us together, and every university has their own stories to tell, and everybody has his or her own stories to share. So I found this very powerful. Thirdly, going back to Vasha's point this morning, the context. Each context has its own personalities and its own stories. And what may have worked in Notre Dame, Father Hesburgh, he may not have flourished, let's say, in Ružomberku. And having a personality like Father Hesburgh, more on the extrovert side of things, he would get on people's nerves on other places of the world. But he flourished in Notre Dame. And he may not have flourished in a post-Soviet or in a Soviet, in a totalitarian regime. So the context. And fourthly, for me, the role of the church and faith. I mean, it was inspiring to listen to your stories about people who have been touched by Christ and who brought this presence into the institution, whereas Father Andrey also said it's not about the person, and especially those whose lives are not about themselves, but about the greater glory of God. I mean, they have a deep impact. So these were some of the inspirations that I took away from the conference. The floor is open if you want to say something. Of course, we could also think about 2 very concrete questions. One is the future of the Catholic Universities Partnership. We occasionally get the question, should we invite other universities? And my response to that is, well, what brings us together is this history of post-Soviet countries, post-communist countries. But it wouldn't hurt maybe to have 1 or 2 people from from other universities be invited to a meeting like this one, as we did in Tbilisi. So we had a person from the Angelikum, if you remember, in Sakopor in Milan. That may be helpful. But again, this is open for discussion. And the other thing that's open for discussion, of course, is if we have these wonderful stories, is there anything we want to do with that? And it could be a special edition of a journal, it could be a book or so, but these are always open questions after any conference. So let me just stop here and tell you, you have 17 minutes for brilliant songs. You may not even need the mic. Any thoughts? If not, I can tell you where I said we could improve, but I did not do it. Yes, Jim. Should we get the mic?
So a very short response to Clement's question about expanding the group. I think it's always important to distinguish between, or to keep in mind the difference between ambition and community. And there's no easy answer to expansion. But ambition gets in our way, in the sense that if the focus is on simply increasing numbers, having more universities, more connections, and so forth, then it dilutes the more important issue, which is community, and particularly friendship. And, you know, for me, this is one of the insights I've gotten through participation in this group, which is the centrality of friendship. And somebody taught me once, this was Jesus Christ's message. I mean, we can say Jesus Christ had disciples, but in some ways, it's more interesting to think about and useful that Jesus Christ had friends. And those friends spread and did great things. So I think you have to be careful, but ambition is definitely a dangerous thing.
Thank you.
Following Jim, we did have somebody from Sacro Cuore, Milan, with us 2 or 3 times, and then he disappeared. We did have someone from Eichstätt, once or twice, disappeared. We once had somebody from Catholic Institute from Paris, and he also disappeared. So probably it's good where we are now.
I think my position would be for a special meeting with a special topic. We might reach out to, you know, a person who is there for one meeting, and then the other meeting, other topic, other people, but keep the core group as is. I think that's what I'm hearing.
I don't know, and what about the Pontifical University of John Paul II in Krakow? What are the relations with this university?
I do not have close relations with them. I know quite a few of them. Even a few weeks ago I had a lecture there. I never thought about inviting them. Well, I'm not in a position to invite anybody, but we can try, perhaps. We can try. They are quite ambitious in a way, so perhaps they would try to join us. But if they, you know, stay with us forever or for a long time, I don't know really. But
thank you. Yes. Oh, how could I not see that?
So I agree most of what was said, especially by Jim, about ambition and friendship and reality. And my first thought is that we shouldn't, or it's not the first idea to expand. But the question is, what we are always asking ourselves every year, how to involve more our own universities into the work and friendship and everything what are we doing in this year. Because we see that have, let's say, upside downs and the presence of, I don't think, for example, now that, because I'm rector, that all rectors should attend conference. That's not the goal as such. But among our friends, we should have here people who are at that time in the decision-making capacity at their own universities. That's something that we should strive for, because at the end that will be only a group of friends who meet each other, which is really good at that point, but somehow also for institutions to make efforts to invest time, all these and these projects that we have in common, I think it's very important. So for me the question is not to expand, and I think in this very moment that is not the main issue, from my point of view. But the question is how to make our legacy on these two levels. Friendship, commitment, because personal stories are very important. Without them, without friendship, this project is not going on. But also on the other side, how to involve the leadership of our universities more in this very project. So let's say a balance of both, because I think it's very good. And in this respect, I see what we did with students, but we did in different projects now, also publishing this book and working about past and so on. And also I must mention here this summer school involving students. It is a very important project. So let's say friendship and institutional level at the same time, how to combine them and how involve our universities also to be present on institutional level as well as on the level of friendship. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Father. Thank you. I do think having students involved intentionally, and that's why the summer school is so helpful for us, is an area for the COP as such to grow. Not just the meeting, but as such. And secondly, the gender issue. I think being intentional about trying to move towards humanity and women and men in the future. We still have a few minutes. Morgan. It was Morgan's first COP meeting. She is a devout Catholic, so she has a benevolent perspective, but has this innocence of the outsider.
Thank you, Clemens. Building off of your comments about students, and you mentioned the book as well, Father Janko, I would love to know, this may be a question, actually, not a contribution, if anyone has any ideas how we can continue to engage in shared research endeavors, both at the level of our faculty as well as allowing students to meet each other and to learn from other students and the faculty, and perhaps even research projects that are collaborative, because we have, there's so much that we'll have at the universities to give in this room, so much information, so many wonderful perspectives. So how can we continue to activate those bonds? So maybe that's a big question in this moment, but if anyone has thoughts, or also we have a wonderful dinner tonight, I'd love to talk about those kind of questions.
Thank you, Morgan. So research project ideas or initiatives? I have one, and I will knock on your doors. I would be so interested in the moral challenges of Catholic universities. So connecting ethics and the idea of a Catholic university, understanding that some of the moral challenges that we face are different from the moral challenges of secular universities, some are the same, and in an interview basis. So where we maybe have research teams, where we can ask students, administrators, faculty, university leadership about their perspective, alumni, and then try to gather the material. Because I think that could be really interesting also to understand the contextuality of some of the challenges that may be different in Ružomberku than in the US. Just an idea. Yes, Jim.
I'll say something personal that has to do with my experience with this group, and I will underscore what Shelko said. In my experience over the last 20 or so years. The greatest source of frustration has been when the relationships are primarily one person. And to give you an example in this room, you know, if you take Sakakore, for example, we had one great participant, but it was never more than a single participant. And so when he dropped out, there was none. And so for me personally, what was always a great concern is how do we get our partner universities to care about what we're doing? And that doesn't mean that rectors always have to be there or, you know, anybody in particular. What that does mean, and it's important for all of us, it's also true at Notre Dame, for me, Clemens, and others, is we have to make sure that our universities understand what we're doing and care enough that it will be possible for their faculty to come to the meetings. I mean, literally to come. And so it's something we all need to work on, is educating our leaders and making sure, you know, not that they go to sleep at night thinking about Catholic University partnership is the greatest thing that's ever been created, but that it's worth pursuing.
I guess I am a new college representative. I really love the comment you made earlier. It's Christian, right? No, yes. That you made about planting seeds. And I think what you were just saying, Jim, kind of fits into this as well, and what Morgan suggested. That is, there are a lot of different things that CUP could do, lots of seeds that could be planted, and generating those ideas, shared research, obviously already established. Somebody had the idea for a leadership institute, somebody had the idea for a summer school, and those things have been planted and they're growing and flourishing. And so having lots of ideas and planting them, and then some will grow and some won't. But scattering a lot of them is probably a good idea. And then the same thing might be true of people, that if you bring more people from each institution into the partnership, not necessarily, as you've been saying, not more institutions, but more participants, then there's just so much more likelihood that the seed that's planted for the institution flourishes, not because there's one person, just like all the leadership that we've heard about over the last 2 days, but because that person is surrounded by other people and everything can, you know, grow in mutual support.
Thank you, Katie. And I know that Craig and Morgan are taking notes here, so we'll be able to follow up after the meeting. Any final comments? Good? Exhausted good or satisfied good? Good. Wonderful. Then, Marketa, I will give you the word as our host, our wonderful host, and you will tell us how our life will continue after we depart.
Okay. Well, thank you for the word. I don't know, we want to come to... Sorry? Okay, announcement, but yeah, yes, sorry. I didn't understand what you mean. Well, last words. What I would like to say is that I'm grateful that you came to Ružomberku, that we could meet each other face to face. Because it's true that we used to meet each other periodically online. But it's not so useful, fruitful, and let's say friendship, yes. Thank you. It's ending already. Well, and it was what made sense for me, and I would like to tell you personally that I'm grateful that you came and I could meet you here. And I don't know if in the end, if I can compare it, it is like these 2 days are for me like a puzzle. Because we started with the amazing ceremony of Doctor Honoris Causa, we continued with our conference and the opening speech and these 2 days which were really fruitful and inspirative, especially for me, because I mentioned it to Clemens. I'm social worker, especially, and my specialization is the social work, and I learned from you so much during this day, and I'm really grateful. And in the end, tomorrow day, the ordination of the friendship, it's an amazing end of these days. And I don't know if we mentioned it, we have 20th anniversary Catholic University Partnership. And I think that this relation between the root of the Robert Nanovic, he's original from the Slovak, is amazing that you came here and this conference should be organized here. So thank you that you came. I hope that we will meet next year or when?
We will meet next year. We invite ourselves to Zagreb. And the rector
yeah, because it was my question.
Not yet. No.
Okay. Yeah. So. Sorry. Yeah.
Megger is inviting all of us.
Yes. Okay. So.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I
No. I don't know. In any case, we were discussing our online meeting.
Yeah.
So we are also proud and happy to invite you to come to Zagreb next year. So because Zagreb was in 2017, we were hosting our Catholic University Partnership. I was just looking at some photos. We were all younger, some of us here. And I saw a beautiful picture of František, future bishop, who visited at that time Zagreb 2 or 3 times already. And at that time we had a conference entitled Hope in the Future. So I was talking with Clemens, and we were proposing that next year it should take place in May, if it's good for you. We are going to propose the dates, maybe this weekend between. I know that there is a commencement on Notre Dame, but not week before. That would be like the very.
Maybe 11 to 14.
11 to 14. You have commencement now.
No.
Yeah, that's weekend would be. So I hope it's going to be good for you, and we are glad to invite you and hope to see you in Zagreb. So we will see what have we done in between. Some of you who visited already Zagreb, and everything else we are going to do in these months. So once again.
Thank you.
After the Ružomberku,
okay, so and in the end, I would like to invite you for one exhibition. Associate Professor Conan should clarify more you. If you are interested now, we can go downstairs, because some of you received as a gift from our rector amazing Bible, and the painters of this artists are on the ground of our library. So if you are interested, we would like to invite you for this exhibition.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's up to you, Associate Professor.
Yeah, so you are warmly invited. It will not take much time, and it's wonderful. It's a collection of apparels from scenes from the Old and New Testament by a very great Slovak painter. So
just about 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, it will not take much time. So
it's not.
If you feel like
one room. Okay, and in the end, practical information in relation regarding our dinner. We will meet in front of the hotel 6:45, please, if that is possible, and we will pick you up by our cars. So we arrange the transfer into the restaurant, and we will meet at 6:45 in front of the hotel. Is it fine for you?
This is fine.
Pasha, can you come to the Achko? Sorry? Achko Hotel. Do you know where it is?